My life so far. I grew up in a family of 5. I was the middle child. I was never loved by either of my parents, neither the one contracted out to Iraq, nor the one raising me at home. This was just a biased conclusion of mine, resulting from confrontations and conversations with the both of them. I was raised in a Lutheran family, not that it matters. My life has never really had anything to do with what lies above. My best friend since I remember was raised in a crack house. Also not that it matters, since no outside individual has had that much of an effect on my life. Until then. I went to private schools, funded by my hardworking parents, until I decided I wanted to switch over to public high school at that level of education. Up until high school, I was always obedient and never raised any red flags with my parents. Mostly my mother, since she was the sole parental figure in my life. Father was always deployed or contracted out to a foreign country. Once high school hit, I was the typical loser at the start. Since I didn't know much of the teenager life considering my upbringings in the private schools. I had known nothing aside from Bible banging and the seasonal soccer games. From my fairly tall for my age and quite stocky, my brain led me to joining the football team, where I learned many valuable lessons of teen puberty, which are in no need to be mentioned. I went on to find a liking to running the distance races, 1 and 2 mile, in track and field that year of high school, where I then decided that next year I would join the cross-country team instead of the football team. I found to like my slimmer, handsome body that came with being on the cross-country team and decided to continue the trend by joining the swim team. This trend of handsome body forming led females to me. As females were a fairly new discovery to me, I found it quite interesting. And so, the first and possibly the only love of my life came along. It would be a lie to say that I don't remember every single encounter I ever had with her. She simply astounded me with every confrontation I had. I first saw her in the hallway, very typical of a first love from high school. She was wearing a beautiful white cardigan, blue jeans that were so tight to complement her oh-so-beautiful tight bottom, her hair straightened to the lower part of her back, and to top it off, the white trash sneakers indicating her trailer park livelihood. For whatever reason, I couldn't pass up my first sight of this beauty. My first passerby action on her went simply like this. "What is your name?" Followed by the answer of April. And she continued on her journey to whatever class she was scheduled for. My heart damn near exploded asking that question, never being so nervous for anything up to that point in my life. As every classical high school love novel goes, I pursued my interest in her, being as beautiful as I thought she was. I didn't say a word to April for months to follow. I only passed her in the hallway, nervously thinking of what I should say. One day came where I decided to ask her to attend a school play with me, and by God, it somehow worked. April said, "Yes, I will attend the school play with you." It was something lame like Robin Hood. I had no intentions of giving the play my attention. I had all eyes, 2 of them, on her. April and I, mostly April, had a splendid time at the play. So much that she decided to join the high school actor and actress group, whatever it was named. Regardless, April and I soon became that ordinary boyfriend-girlfriend you see at school every day, kissing at the locker, walking one another to class. April and I had many memorable events that I would love to share, but I don't have the patience to share. It all seemed to end in an instant, and high school was over. Fun was forever gone, never to appear in my mind again or ever happen again. As soon as high school was over, I proposed to April. She said yes. We had a white trash wedding at the courthouse with only our best friends in attendance. Soon thereafter, parting ways to go to separate colleges. In a few explainable events, my parents were soon both led to suicide. I then found never to be the answer. With my somewhat financial stability gone, I turned to joining the military. I joined, went to the military's basic training, and was then sent off to Germany without leave. Upon my arrival in Germany, I instantly called my lovely wife to tell her of my oh-so-wonderful experiences in basic training and others up to my arrival in Germany. She sounded so effing heartbroken while talking to me. As I had previously told her that it didn't matter where I went, I wanted her to finish out her degree prior to reuniting with me. Soon enough came, as the summer season does. She and my only sibling were to come and visit me where I was stationed. They were to come on a plane June 3rd and stay until the 24th of the same month. Early on the morning of June 3rd, my wife April and my sister Denise were on the way to the airport. A drunk driver crossed over the median, killing both my only living family and my beloved wife. Here I am, on the second Christmas, without a family to belong, finally bringing my story to the public. Think running from the police is scary? Try swimming. It was summer break in 2010. Me and my friend Aaron were spending the day at the lake and stopped in to eat at a small restaurant close to the beach where we were going to. Aaron gets my attention and points at two really hot petite girls wearing short cutoff shorts and tank tops ordering food. They look wild and fun. We kept glancing over at them and then decided to get the balls to go talk to them when we finished eating. We asked if it was cool to sit next to them and they said, go right ahead. Everything we say, they laugh at, and they seem interested in us. I mostly locked eyes with the brunette, Brianna. She was shy and was giving me the I want you look, while the blonde, Chelsea, was more into Aaron. They were 16 and 17, just like me and Aaron. They invite us to go cliff jumping with them and we respond with, hell yeah. We pile into my Civic, and the first thing one of them says from the back seat is, do you all smoke weed? I say, maybe, why do you ask? Because your car smells like a pot factory, dude. Do you have any? I tell them I have one joint and a roach. They giggle, and Chelsea says, stop by my grandma's house up the road and I'll grab my party supplies before we go. So I drove them there. A few minutes later, they come out with a big beach bag wearing the same outfit but with their shorts unbuttoned, exposing their bikini bottoms and having their hair fixed more. Gosh darn, says Aaron to me. We agreed we were in for a fun time, and I slipped 3 condoms from my glove compartment to my right shoe. We got vodka, Pepsi, some more weed, and an extra something for us. My brother hooks me up when I want. We park at the beach and follow them to the spot. Had to walk about a quarter mile down the road and sneak through people's yards and head down the trail in the woods, enjoying the view of their backsides bounce with each step. After seeing no trespassing signs, I ask them what happens if we get caught. And they tell us a lot of teens come down here to party. They just try and keep them out. We reach the cliff spot and it's very secluded. The girls strip down to their bikinis, and I wonder how the heck I'm supposed to hide my erection in my swimming trunks. They tell us before we get effed up that we have to check for rocks in the water so we don't end up dead. We followed them down the cliff and grabbed a really long branch to help them check. As long as we jumped about 6 feet out, we were safe from the cliff drop. As soon as they reach the top, they both jump without telling us, and Aaron looks down and says, F no. They climb back up and laugh at us and tell us they'll show us their tees if we jump. They raise their bikini tops and we jump in with our jaws dropped. The wind sounds like a tornado, and then I see pitch black when I hit the water. I swim up towards the sunlight and gasp for air. They woot for us and jump down to join us. Chelsea swims to Aaron and Brianna swims to me. We splash each other and climb back up to the top. Brianna smacks my backside and tells me to climb faster, and I let her in front of me so I could smack hers and mock her. We reach the top and decide to break out the good stuff. Chelsea rolls up a joint while Aaron lights up ours, and Brianna passes me the cotton candy vodka after she takes a swig. Me and Aaron sat impressed watching the girls chief on the roach until it burnt their fingers. We talk and laugh, and Chelsea pulls a small baggie out of her cigarette pack and asks if we've ever done coke. We lie and say a few times, and they snort the first lines off her makeup mirror and pass it to Aaron first. I take my first snort nervous as heck. A rush of awesomeness pours through my head like a dam being opened to fill an empty river. Like I just scratched off the numbers to a winning lottery ticket. They grab our arms and make us get up and make us run with them to jump again. This time, the fear was gone, and it was a pure adrenaline rush. The girls whisper to each other on the climb back up, and they tell us we're doing belly button shots. So we slurp shots from their pierced belly buttons, and they did ours in a much more sexual way with a slow lick. After joint number 2 and another coke bump, one thing led to another, and Brianna was riding me like a rodeo bull standing waist deep in the water below the cliff. I didn't even say, let me grab a condom, after she wrapped her legs around me and was dry humping me with her tongue in my mouth. With the orange light from the sunset glowing on her beautiful face, it was on. After we finished, Chelsea asked if we were okay down there, laughing at us as we climbed back up. Aaron was pulling up his shorts, catching his breath with a smile like I'd never seen on his face before. We started passing the bottle again, and the sound of a CB radio echoed through the woods. I look over and see a flashlight and panic. We hide everything, and a sheriff and another officer walks up the path to us. You kids having a good time? We got some noise complaint from the folks who own this property. Aaron says we will leave, sir, and he walks closer to us. Are you smoking a little pot? I look at the others frozen as I was going to say, no, sir. He grins and says, what are y'all's names? Chelsea asks if we're in trouble, and he tells us that we're trespassing on private property and asks to check her bag. We all look at each other and blurt out, run! And we all run and jump down to the water. I rose up to the surface and made sure they all followed me and started swimming like an Olympic swimmer towards the other side of the lake. Stop, 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 we will find you. He starts shining his flashlight at the water, and we go under every time it shines on us. We make it to the other side and start climbing up the muddy bank, sinking knee deep with each step. We lay on the shore, catching our breath after the 2 football field length swim. Chelsea tells us she left her wallet and phone in my car with the rest of ours. Thank God. We look across the top of the cliff at the flashlights and get up and start running through the woods barefoot. We crouch down by a fallen tree and catch our breath again. Talking about how we are from the cocaine and weed in her bag they are looking through right now, we decided to start swimming towards the parking lot along the shoreline. After about 30 minutes of swimming, we see a boat coming towards us with a spotlight and swim to a huge fallen tree in the shallow water to hide. They slow down and shine the light everywhere. I hold Brianna and calm her down from crying and wait for it to pass. When it does, we slowly move down the shore with just our heads out of the water. After over an hour, we swim across the lake again and sneak up the hill to the parking lot. Thank God there were other cars parked there from the campsite next to the beach, or my car would be quite obvious. I get my keys from the gas tank door and drive the girls home. I tell Brianna my number and she puts it in her phone, and Chelsea did the same for Aaron. We were stupid for not getting their numbers because they never called or texted us. We didn't even ask for their last names and spent hours looking for them on Facebook. We didn't find them. I pulled out and would have expected Brianna to call me if she were pregnant. We drove to her grandma's house a couple weeks later, and no one was home, so we decided to leave them alone. To this day, me and Aaron have laughs about that night when our wives aren't around. My sad story about losing my virginity. It was 2008, and I'm in the 9th grade. The last bell rang the sound of freedom to start the weekend. I walk out into the hallway, and my girlfriend's best friend hands me a note and swears she didn't read it. I get seated on the bus, and I open the folded note that I still today have next to me. Quote, I want you to come see me at my house tonight. I will text you when my parents are asleep. My brother is staying the night at his friend's house, so we can have some alone time. Love, Grace. XOXOXO. We were going to be together forever because we had fallen in deep love through our 2-month relationship. We got detention for kissing in the hallway. Our MySpace pic was us kissing. We called each other every night and had phone sex the night before, so I'm hoping in my mind that tonight she wants the real deal. As soon as I get home, I get into my dad's truck and steal all the change out of the cup holder and the half-pack of Marlboros from the passenger seat. I Google how to have sex, how to turn a girl on, how to please a girl in sex, how you know if a girl is horny. I was 15, of course. I'd watched plenty of porn and wasn't completely dumb to the idea of sex, but wanted to have knowledge because I was a virgin as Grace was too. At 7:30, I put my earphones in and play My Chemical Romance on my iPod Nano, light up a cigarette, and start riding my skateboard into town. Flipping my long hair so I could see, I head into a gas station and grab a box of condoms and lay them on the counter and start counting out $3.85 or something like that with my quarters, dimes, and pennies. Yes, I was broke. A voice behind me said, at least you're buying those and not diapers. I turned around, and it's Grace's dad's police officer friend that came over to drink beer with him. I panic and come up with, yeah, I heard you can fill him with enough water to fill an entire bathtub. He laughs and says, yeah, and they would keep me from arresting Grace's dad when he knocks you out for getting her pregnant, too. I begin to really panic and leave the gas station thinking about what would happen if he told Grace's dad. We would have to break up, and I wouldn't lose my V-card to my hot girlfriend I masturbated thinking about every night for the past 2 goddamn months. Enough meeting at the skate park, French kissing for 2 hours a night, leaving with a boner hard enough for a blacksmith to use as an anvil. I was ready to pound it into this chick and be with her forever. She was all I thought about. I had her name carved into the grip tape of my skateboard, and her notes that smelled like her perfume in my Vans shoebox under my bed. She borrowed my hoodie and wore it during school, and it smelled like her when I got back. Holding her hand everywhere we went, we always had fun times that I still smile about to this day. Quote, they are asleep. Let me know when you get here. I sneak to her window and she opens it. I climb through the bush and hop there. Grace's bedroom smelled like perfume and burnt hair. Deftones playing on the radio just loud enough where her mom wouldn't walk down the hall to ask her to turn it down. She's wearing a tank top and short shorts, done her makeup and straightened her hair for me. Looked so beautiful, her eyes were looking into mine, her hands shaking as were mine. We lay on her bed and start making out, leading to the first time we had sex. I may sound like a pervert for saying it now, but F me, it was amazing. She looked incredible, and we enjoyed each other. When we are done, I shove the used condom in my pocket, and we kiss for an hour, and we sneak out to smoke. I kiss her and tell her I will call her when I get home. I get home and try calling her and get voicemail every time. I texted her saying, I love you. I left the condom wrapper in your floor somewhere. Get rid of it. And don't get a response until 2 hours later saying, come back over. I try calling again and get voicemail and get a text saying, phone keeps hanging up. Just come over, baby. So I say, okay, wait by your window. When I get there, I sneak up to the window and can hear Grace screaming at her mom. I get ready to hide on the side of the house when I'm slammed into the ground and held down. Boy, if I ever see you around my daughter again, I will beat the S out of you. Get the F out of my yard. He picks me up and pulls me by the arm until we are in the road and shoves me and makes me fall. I look back and see him pick up my skateboard and sling it way above me, and it hits the road far away from me. I grab it and I skate like I had an effing tiger chasing me. The next morning, my mom and dad bang on the bedroom door and told me they got a call from Grace's parents and told me they found a condom wrapper and that I had been making her smoke cigarettes with me. An embarrassing argument ended up being no laptop and no phone for an effing month. Grace's parents pulled her out of public school, and her best friend passed notes for me and Grace, telling how much we love each other and we will figure out a way to see each other. But we didn't. She switched to a private school, and her parents watched her like a hawk. Grace's friends stopped giving me notes for a week, and one day she tells me Grace wants to break up. As soon as I get home, I grabbed the house phone and called her crying, convinced her mom to hand Grace the phone. She is crying too, explaining that her mom found the notes and wanted us to end it until her dad grabbed the phone and said, goodbye, and hung up. When I finally get my laptop and phone back, I cry listening to the voicemail she sneaked, crying in all of them, telling me she loves me and she never wants to lose me. I was heartbroken through all this, and to this day believe her parents effing overreacted. I discovered she ended up with a preppy boy a year later when I added her when Facebook became a thing. Had a few photos of her sitting on the couch with him and was dressed completely different. Her music interests were effing pop music. Her parents approved of this Sorry, it's what we refer to them as, and I had to move on. Grace's parents molded her into the perfect girl they wanted, and I stayed the same. Our paths just split. All because the cop asshole called her dad and told him about seeing me buy the condoms and didn't like me because I was busted ding-dong ditching with friends last year. My wife made me get rid of all the notes, but I kept a few. So that is my virginity/lost love story. I hope it occupied your time, and if it didn't, back out and don't be a downvote douche. Writing this gave me nostalgia. Please respect that. I pooped myself on a camping trip with my girlfriend. Back in 2017, my friend Dylan and his girlfriend Leah invited me to go on a camping trip with them, and I invited my girlfriend Tori to come along, and she said yes. We'd only been dating for a little over 2 months, but I didn't think it would be too awkward since we recently started sleeping together, and she had hung out with Dylan and Leah a few times. We all wanted a real camping trip and chose Red River Gorge in eastern Kentucky. We hiked up a hill way out in the woods and found a good spot where people had set up camp before. I brought a 2-person tent and blankets to make a sleeping pallet, and Dylan brought his 4-person tent along with an inflatable mattress for them and their German Shepherd, Teddy. I felt like a cheap bastard watching them inflate it while I explained to Tori that I spent $140 on all the stuff I bought, and I was broke. She told me she didn't care, as long as she was with me. We got everything set up, started a campfire, and started drinking Jim Beam and Coke while the girls made bullfrogs with their Kool-Aid and vodka. We roasted hot dogs and s'mores and talked about family camping trips, party stories, and whatnot. I was glad to see Tori laughing and having a really great time. I held her and glanced up at the stars through the trees a few times, thanking God I had her. Everyone got pretty drunk, and Dylan had finished a 5th of the whiskey, and I was sweating like a whore in church because it was so humid. Around 1 a.m., we were in our tents, and me and Tori had a wild, sweat-drenched sex session and slept in our underwear because it was so muggy inside the tent. I woke up around 5 a.m. with my stomach cramping like hell. I clenched my eyes and bit my tongue, trying not to moan out in pain and wake up Tori. I put my clothes on, crawled out of the tent, stood up, and dug out a roll of toilet paper from the bags between the tents and ran into the deep brush. I tripped on a tree root and dropped the effing toilet paper and it rolled down the hill. I started running back to get another roll and couldn't handle the pain anymore. I tried to let out a little fart and felt warm juice squirt out. F me, F, please, no, I said as I pulled my shorts and boxers down to examine them with the light from my phone. There was brown chili-looking ass all in my boxers, like pulling over and opening your smoking car hood and you know your engine is effed. I quickly pulled my boxers off, squatted down to finish my intensely messy S that sounded like pouring a bucket of wet sand on the leaves, and felt so much better. I tossed my boxers away from the trail and heard someone walking down from the campsite. I freaked out because I had S all over my legs, and on one of my hands, it smelled like an effing porta potty in the middle of summer. It ended up being the dog, Teddy. I shooed him away and used the bandana wrapped around my forehead to wipe my butt and tossed it. I sneaked back to the campsite and cleaned up with a bar of soap and a bottle of water with the dog awkwardly watching me the entire time, and decided to sacrifice my deodorant stick and rub it all over my skin and down my butt crack to mask the horrid smell. I went back to the tent, cuddled up to Tori, and went back to sleep. We woke up to Leah screaming. We got out of the tent and saw Teddy running out of their tent with her screaming, "What the F, you nasty GD dog?" We walked over and asked what was wrong, and Leah told us Dylan's stupid dog dragged her underwear into the tent full of S, and she had it on the back of her shirt and all over the mattress. Tori was disgusted and looked away while Dylan got out and went to find a stick. I was panicking, hoping Tori wouldn't see my American Eagle boxers, and told her, "That's so sick, I don't want to see them," and hoped she would follow me back to the tent. But she didn't. She ignored me and stood there while Dylan held the baby blue boxers on the end of the stick, dripping drops of poop on the ground, holding his nose as he put them in a Walmart bag. I stood there and saw Tori looking at my waist out of the corner of my eye with a fake disgusted shocked look on my face and not one on hers. "Whose effing underwear is it?" Leah asked, looking at me and Dylan. We both denied it was ours, and I suggested it was someone who previously camped here. "Yeah, well, it seemed pretty effing fresh to me. I'm a CNA, trust me, I know." Tori was completely quiet while the two fought about the dog always being into something, and Leah threatening to leave Dylan if he didn't get rid of Teddy. I tried to keep my poker face on while Dylan poured water on Teddy and scrubbed with his toothbrush to get the S out of the fur because, of course, the dog rolled in the S. There was no way in heck I was going to admit that I S'd myself. I had a feeling Tori knew it was mine because even though it was dark, I'm sure she saw my boxers when my shorts sagged. Leah would effing kill me if I said it was mine after having to throw away her shirt and go through all of that. We ate breakfast, packed up, stopped to fill up on gas, and started driving back home. Tori was very quiet and funny acting towards me. She randomly says, "I would be pretty mad if I woke up to the smell of those underwear. But I would understand that someone got sick," and stared at me. I took a deep breath and admitted I got sick, and did not ever think of the dog getting to them when I threw them in the woods. She asked me why I didn't own up to it, and I told her I was too embarrassed to. We didn't have sex for 2 weeks, and she acted funny around me. A month later, she got really drunk from mixing brandy and gin, essed all over herself, and puked her guts up in my bathroom and was too drunk to clean herself up. She was laying on the floor crying, so I picked her up, put her in the bathtub, and cleaned the S and puke from the toilet and floor, then bathed her like a real boyfriend would do. She told me she understood why I was too embarrassed to own up to my SE boxers.
I was asked to a threesome, and I declined. I was 16 years old and was a swimming instructor at the local outdoor pool during the summer. My job basically was to teach little kids ages 6 to 10 how to float. It was a job where I had to do very little for getting some good cash, so like any teenager looking to make a quick buck, I jumped on it. I had a clock-in time of 3:45 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. Fairly bad time to be swimming in my opinion, because summers in India are brutal. But anyway, in those 2.5 hours, me and another instructor had 2 classes of about 30 kids each. The pool had an adjoining deck where the parents could stand and watch their kids flap around in the water. In the second class, we had 2 kids who were pretty good swimmers, and I always wondered why they were in my class from the start of the summer. To clarify, the local pool place had 2 pools, a small one where kids who were starting out had to practice paddling and floating, and a full-size pool where the kids who were a little older and knew how to swim would practice. I, being a first-time instructor, was allocated the small pool for obvious reasons. Anyways, the kid who knew how to swim would be shifted to the big pool by their parents with the recommendation of instructors from my pool later in the summer. When I talked to my partner/other instructor about these kids, he told me that they were the bigger pool last year, but their moms got them shifted to the pool back this summer. Weird moms, I thought, but shrugged it off. For changing rooms, we instructors had a small outhouse kind of building, which barely had a shower and a loo, but no doors or curtains. The changing rooms also had small ventilators through which if someone wanted to, could see the person showering. Pretty sucky, but it was after all a small pool place. After 2 classes, both the instructors were off the clock and the next set of instructors would come in for the last 2 classes of the day. Every day when I'd be stepping off the pool, I would talk to the kids' parents about the class and how their kids did, how they could improve, etc. I would make it a point to talk to every parent who wanted to have a word before going to the showers, so that they could be on their way and I could take a shower in peace without making anybody wait for me. The mom of those 2 kids, however, were not interested in that. They would make it a point to wait every day for me to finish, come out of the showers, and then talk to me about anything except their kids. They gave their kids smartphones so that they wouldn't interrupt. It started getting weirder by the day, and I made it a point to keep recommending them to shift their kids to the bigger pool just so that they would get off my back. I couldn't just complain to my supervisor because it wasn't anything extreme, just a little weird. The moms were obviously not willing to listen that their kids ready for the big pool and that they were still learning to paddle and they needed my help. One day after my class, while I was showering, I could see these 2 moms snickering outside the outhouse and looking at me. They couldn't see the whole estate because we blocked off the walls of the ventilator, so you couldn't really stand next to the ventilator, but you could still see the face of the person showering. I was thoroughly grossed out and just wanted to go home. I didn't even bother to acknowledge them and just walked towards the parking lot. I was standing by my bike, putting on the helmet, when I felt a tap on the shoulder. And who would it be but one of the moms? Let's call them M1 and M2. M1. Hi sir, how are you today? We wanted to talk to you about how our kids did today. Me. Disgusted look. They did fine. Like I said, they don't need to be in my pool. They could shift to the other one. M2. No, they still need you. Plus it gives us a chance to look at you while you teach them. Me. What? M2. I mean, we could still see how good they are doing in the class. Me. Like I said, they are good swimmers now. They don't need me. Just wanting this weird conversation to be over. M1. Okay. Actually, we were thinking if we could talk to you about something else too. We really need help from you. Me. Look, ma'am, I'm just trying to go home and I'm doing everything I need to for your kids. M1. No, we need you to help us moms. Me. Help you how? M1. We want you to teach us how to swim. We really want to learn and be able to swim with our little angels. Me. I'm sorry, ma'am, I only teach kids. M2. Can't you make an exception for us? We'll make it worth your time. She starts to stroke my arm and both of them take steps towards me, coming uncomfortably close. I realize exactly what she's implying. At this point, the parking lot was pretty empty because all the kids and their parents had left and so had my partner. Me. I'm sorry, ma'am, this isn't something that I'm interested in, and can you please not touch me? M1. Don't be ridiculous. We just wanted to learn swimming and do some other things with you. Me. Stop it, ma'am. Do you realize I'm 16 years old and this is illegal and you both would be charged as pedophiles? M2. Oh, come on. You don't look 16. You are lying. Do you really not want us? You always wait after class and talk to us alone. Me. Ma'am, that's my job. I'm supposed to do that. This is making me uncomfortable. If you both don't leave me alone, I'm going to complain to my supervisor and call the police on you. Both of them started squirming and took some steps back. I took the chance to start my bike and rushed away. As soon as I got home, I called my partner and told him exactly what happened. He told me to calm down and told me that we'll talk to the supervisor tomorrow. We never did talk to the supervisor because apparently after I left, both of the moms canceled their kids' membership and they never returned. I didn't really want to pursue the matter, just forget about it. Years after, the Chad in me still says that I could have had a threesome when I was 16 and I'm an idiot who passed it up. But at that time, I was pretty traumatized and didn't know what to make of the whole situation. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm missing out a few lines from the conversation, but I just don't remember quite a bit of it. This is all I remember. Anyways, thanks for reading if you did, and again, discount any mistakes that I might have made. Let me know what you think. My friends went missing when I was 6. I guess to start off, I should introduce myself. My name is Melissa, I'm 16 years old, and around 10 years ago, 4 of my friends went missing. I remember the day clearly, yet some parts are all fuzzed up. It's strange how the mind works. Anyways, I was 6. My dad, older brother Matthew, and younger brother Liam were driving to a birthday party. It was hosted at this old knockoff showbiz pizza place. We lived in a tiny town in Utah, so this was really the only place for kids to hang out. A cheap place for parents to drop off their demons to occupy them. My brother, who was 15 at the time, worked there as a waiter while my dad worked the day shift. When we were really little, my dad would sometimes let one of the managers babysit us, mostly me. I remember him well. He always wore plaid and flannel and almost was always working on something. There was another manager too, but he was very distant. He disliked kids despite having his own. He never talked much. I'm getting off topic. Anyways, the second we pulled into the semi-crowded lot of the pizza place, I hopped out. I threw the glass doors open and ran into the main show area. There was the big stage with bright multicolored lights showcasing 3 classic animatronic animals. There was confetti on the tiled floor and glitter on the tables. I was very quick to find my friend, the birthday boy. He had russet ginger hair and brown eyes. He was 2 years older than me, turning 9 that day. I don't remember his name as my brain repressed this day so much. Mostly him. We were close, I knew that. I probably just wanted to forget to ease the pain. I remember grabbing him into a hug and talking for a while as the other members of the party filled in. There were 5 of us in total. I remember the others, but not much. Only key features. The oldest, I believe, was a boy with dark brown hair, and he was tall, like really tall. I remember something strange with his eyes. They were cold, yet so warm and welcoming to us. The other boy, I think, was the opposite. He had long, messy, dark hair and was really short. I think his name started with a J, Jeremy or Jamie maybe. I don't even remember if he was a girl or a boy. There was a girl though, I remember her well. She has honey blonde hair and I think green or blue eyes. She was hyper and sweet. I think she called me Melly Bear. I do know she had a puppy, a little yellow lab named Fetch. Strange name, I'm aware. Those were all of them. The 5 of us, great friends. The day was a blur. Talking, eating pizza, playing, watching shows, playing those crappy arcade games, kid stuff. But the shit hit the fan pretty soon. A rabbit costume, I think. It had to be a costume. It moved too fluidly, too human. It scared me. It was yellow with fluffy golden fur and green eyes. It had a purple bow tie and matching buttons. It was terrifying. It said that there was a tradition for birthday parties here, that the Golden Bunny would take the kids to a special birthday room and give them gifts in a private performance. He said he would take us one at a time. The ginger hair boy went first, then the tall one, then the short one, and then her. The honey-haired girl. As he led her out, I swear I could hear him whisper, "Fetch isn't dead, dear. He's with the others. I'll show you him." Minutes passed. After a while, I grew impatient and went to go investigate. I saw the rabbit come out of a room, moving swiftly to the parts and services room near the stage. I walked up to the door, which he had closed, and knocked gently. I heard nothing. Gripping the handle, I twisted it and pushed it inwards, or so I tried. The door was jammed tight. I pushed as hard as my little 6-year-old body could, and finally the door gave way. I caught myself on the slippery tile, the door nearly shutting behind me. Thankfully, there was a bit of light, letting me see a little. The floor was slick with something dark and warm. I didn't realize it right away. I didn't see the huddled mounds. I didn't see the blood on my hands and the blood splattered in the wall. I only saw him. He was lying simply against the wall, hugging his fox plush close to his blood-stained red shirt. I remember crawling over and shaking him, trying to get a response. I remember the next bit fully. I'll write it as I remember. "Hello? Are you awake? Melissa?" "Yes, you idiot. Why are you asleep?" "Mel, you shouldn't be here." He had reached to gently touch my face, blood dripping from his mouth. I only then saw the red, the wound on his stomach. "You're bleeding. Hold on, I could get help." "No, you can't." "But..." "No, Melissa, I'm a goner." He paused to cough some. He weakly lifted the old fox plush to my shaking hands. "Take care of him, will ya?" "You..." "Shh, it's okay. Find him for me. for us, all right? He was slipping out of consciousness. Please, hang on. He went limp. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. I couldn't do anything but get up and run as fast as I could. I locked myself in the restroom for a few hours. I washed the blood from my clothes and hands, though it stained a little. I stumbled back into the room afterwards. I'm not sure why. The light illuminated the room fully. There was blood splattered on the floor. Streaks indicated something being dragged. Signs of a struggle were present. I screamed. The police came soon after, but they couldn't find a thing. No bodies, no weapons, no fingerprints. I cried all day. I didn't answer questions. I clung to my brothers. Before we left, I took his hoodie. I still have it in my closet to this day. I remember seeing his mom before we left. I ran to her and hugged her so tight and sobbed harder than I thought possible. It was strange how I felt better clinging to her rather than my own mother. I told her what happened, about the rabbit leading them away. I questioned my dad about a rabbit suit, but he didn't know a thing. There was no birthday party thrown for kids there. There was no private performance for birthday kids. All of it was a lie. I've been putting it off for years, doing minimal research on who this killer could be, but now I feel as if I should dig deeper. I'll go look for clues and keep you guys updated. Wish me luck. I see a boy whenever somebody dies. I was 5 when I first met him. I could still remember it. We were driving to the grocery store in a big van. My dad at the wheel and my mom arguing with my older brother over an M-rated video game he wanted to buy. The commotion started to make my little sister cry. I sat in the back seat all by myself, trying to ignore it all as I played on my Game Boy, but it was too noisy and hot to focus on it. Finally, I gave up and decided to lie down on the seat, taking a nap before we got to the store. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, I was really hot. Sweat was dripping down my scalp and my mouth felt like sandpaper. Sitting up, I rubbed my head and tried to remember where I was, only to realize that the car was parked near the grocery store entrance. My family, no doubt caught up in their arguments, must have forgotten about me. I wasn't alone in the car though. I realized as I noticed there was a strange figure sitting at the passenger seat, looking forward at the car parked in front of us with their hands behind their head. "Who are you?" I asked bluntly, and I could see I'd taken them by surprise. The figure jumped up from their seat and turned their head around to look at me. I could see that it was a boy with pale skin and silver hair that reminded me of the characters in my brother's games. To my surprise, he smiled when he saw me. "Hey there, little guy," he greeted as if he were one of my relatives before he crawled forward into the middle seats. "I didn't think you'd wake up." I backed away as he came closer, which made him laugh as he sat backward in the chair, staring down at me. "Come on, there's no need for that. I swear I won't touch you." Being a 5-year-old, I wasn't equipped to handle a situation like this, and so I resorted to stating the obvious. "This isn't your car," I said. "That's true," he replied as his smile seemed to grow wider. "Don't worry, kid. I won't be here too long. I'm just waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked back, but in reply he just winked at me before lying back down on the seats. It was then that I noticed the smell around him, ashy and stale, like a dying fire. Not wanting to say anything else to the stranger, I moved to the edge of the seat and stared to the store's entrance, waiting for my family to come back. After some time passed, I saw my mom walk out toward the van alone in a hurry. It seemed she had finally noticed I was missing. "Hey," I said to the stranger, "you need to leave, my mom's coming." "Really?" he asked as he shot back up to look out the window. To my surprise, he seemed excited about the news. Upon seeing her walking down the lot, he turned to me with an oddly somber look, giving what he'd been acting like just moments before. "Well, kid," he said, "it's been fun talking to you, but I've got to get to work. Don't hate me too much for this, all right?" I was about to ask what he meant when a loud noise outside caught my attention. I turned back to the window to see that where my mother had been standing, a car was now in her place. A woman who I assume was the driver was standing next to the driver's side, screaming and sobbing as a crowd of people surround her. I was confused about what was happening until I saw 2 legs lying in the parking lot, the rest of the body obscured by the parked car. A trail of blood was leaking out from a wound I couldn't see, and as my eyes followed it, I noticed that at the end of the legs were my mother's shoes. I stood frozen for a few seconds as my brain processed the scene, and as tears started to run down my face, I turned around to face the boy. "What did you do?" I called out in anger, only to freeze when I realized I was now alone in the van. Somehow he had slipped out without me even hearing. Now alone and confused, I had no idea what else to do. So I did what any child would have done, crawled into the middle seats, pulled the door open, and ran to my mother. By the time I'd gotten up to her, sizable crowd had already formed, and I could hear the wailing of an ambulance in the distance. I tried to shove my way through the onlookers, and as I did, I noticed the dying fire smell again. Looking to the direction of it, I could see a glimpse of silver hair before it disappeared through the group, and a new burst of energy coursed through my body. I pushed through the crowd with a strength I didn't think I was capable, shouting all the way. As I got to the edge of the crowd, who were now being pushed back by the store security, I could see the boy walking out towards my mom, who was lying in a heap next to the entrance. "Leave her alone!" I shouted, and ran forward before any of the guards could stop me. The boy ignored my pleas as he neared my mother's body. When he got close enough to her, he knelt down by her side and raised his hand out to her. I was just about to reach them when I felt a pair of hands grab my waist and lift me up. "No!" I screeched, kicking and punching at my assailant as they pulled away. I looked over to see that it was my father, who was staring at me with a panicked expression as he marched back toward the crowd. "Let me go!" I protested. "You have to stop him!" But it was too late, I realized as I turned my head back. The boy had his hand resting on my mother's face, and he was staring at me with a look of remorse. In an instant, I stopped all my protesting and began to sob into my dad's shoulder. Later, when we were in the police office, we'd been told that my mother died on the scene. In her hurry to come back for me, she wasn't paying attention to the traffic of the parking lot and didn't notice a car pulling through the next lane. The woman was on her phone and didn't notice my mom until it was too late. I tried to tell them about the boy in the car, who knelt beside my mother as she was lying on the asphalt. However, everyone told me that I was the only one who had tried to run up to her. They even looked through security footage of the parking lot to see if there was anyone else in the van with me before my mother's death, and they saw that there was nobody else inside but me. Eventually, they had a specialist come in and say that the heat of the van, mixed with the trauma of the experience, had caused me to hallucinate the whole thing. Still, though, for the next few days, whenever we ride in that old van, I smell that dying fire scent lingering in the air. I've been paralyzed for 5 years. This morning, I woke up with feeling in my legs again. When I was 17 years old, I was in a horrific car accident that claimed the lives of my father and my little brother Jax. Not only did I lose two of the most important people to me on the same day, but I suffered an irreversible spine injury that left me paralyzed from the waist down. I was a very athletic kid, so suddenly being paralyzed was like having something precious ripped away from me. Track was suddenly no longer an option. My friends were still nice to me, but we eventually all drifted apart as I had completely altered my life around my injury. I had to move to the bottom floor of my 2-story house, and things that I once did mindlessly took planning and a lot of energy to complete. It took about a year to finally get into a steady rhythm of things, and another 2 to accept that being paralyzed is a part of who I am now. There is no cure for being paralyzed. At least that's what I thought. Last night, I was at a bar with a friend of mine named Frankie. She's a loud and rambunctious girl who likes to drink way too much, but I love her to death. It was around midnight when I first spotted the stranger staring at me from a corner booth at the bar. He had a drink in his hand that he was slowly sipping on. He was handsome, in an almost otherworldly sort of way. His porcelain skin seemed to glow in the dank bar light, and his amber eyes were fixated on me. He looked like an angel. He was rather dressed up for a bar in a button-down shirt and black slacks, but his tie was missing and the first few buttons of his shirt were undone. He looked like a businessman that was just having fun. I haven't been on a single date since being in my wheelchair. There are people that honestly don't care about it, but the feeling of being a burden hinders me from going back into the dating scene, so having a gorgeous man openly stare at me was rather unnerving. It took about 10 minutes for Frankie to notice him, and with a sly smile on her face, she subtly found someone to occupy her time, leaving the seat next to me at the table open for someone to claim. It didn't take long for him to take a seat next to me, and as he sat down, I got this feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. He introduced himself as Ray, and we chatted on the weather and what we do for a living. I'm an artist, and he is actually a businessman, as I guessed. It explains the attire. Talking with him was like breathing, simple and easy. He never once asked about why I'm in a wheelchair, which is why I agreed to talk with him longer. As he ordered me more and more drinks, I found myself willingly talking about it for the first time since it happened. The question that followed after my story was one that still strikes me as important. What would you do to be able to walk again? It seemed like a harmless question, one that my friends have asked me before. Of course, the answer is always the same. Anything. I would do anything to be able to feel my legs again, to be able to walk and run and reach the cookies that my mother keeps just out of my reach. His tone was the only thing that was different, the thing that made me uneasy. It was almost teasing, his eyes alight with joy as I answered him. In the following hours, I don't know how, but I knew I made a very grave mistake by answering the way I did. The conversation ended rather abruptly after that, with Frankie falling into the table and spilling our drinks everywhere. I called us an Uber for a way home and prayed that she would be okay on her own. As we waited outside, Ray took my hand in his own and delicately planted a kiss on my knuckles, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. I'll be seeing you soon. Those words now haunt me as I stare at myself in the mirror, standing on my legs for the first time in 5 years. The words weren't a request. It was a statement, a promise. He will be seeing me, and I cannot help but wonder if his gift this morning is a threat or an order. What will I do to be able to walk again? I woke up this morning with the deadly-looking dagger on my nightstand, and symbols that I've never seen before were carved into the hilt, overlapping one another. There were triangles and circles and swirling patterns that resembles vines. That wasn't the only thing different. I could feel my legs. It wasn't just a gradual warm-up to walking. I could stand and jump and run. I'm not sure what I got myself into, but something tells me Ray is not just a normal person. Ever since waking up, I've periodically checked on the dagger, but it hasn't moved from the position on my nightstand. The symbols seem to glow as the night progresses, and I worry what will happen when I see Ray again.
Gorgeous girl. Junior, 17 years old. Math. 3rd hour. I walk into my new class like I did for all my new classes. Nothing special, but I was lucky enough to get 5 to 6 of my friends sitting around me. Most of that class was spent playing video games on our laptops because our teacher was just awful at teaching. Almost as if he tried to teach assuming that the class already knew the material. Like what? How are we supposed to know how to do the problem if you've only shown one example and had already erased it? Ugh, he sucked. I could write a whole post about only him, but I have to stay on track because it's about to get interesting. This class was full of a whole range of students, so I'd probably say there were 4 groups that would stick together and talk. The room was kind of separated in quadrants. Our group was in the back far corner and consisted of jocks, a few gamers, and not to sound self-centered, but I would say more quote-unquote popular kids. Not that it matters much, but, well, actually, yeah, that's kind of important, so remember that. To our left were a few of the rednecks and louder kids, but just between each other so they didn't disrupt class or anything. In front of us were kids that were pretty quiet and focused more on math than talking. And finally, in front of us were this group of girls who were all kind of feminists with a few super feminists. When I say super feminist, I mean 2 of them literally said they hate men and white people, so I don't know what else to tell you. These girls were all pretty cool, besides when it came to the political stuff. But I wouldn't say we were really friends with these girls. Well, I guess most of them. There was this one girl who I'll call R that sat right in front of me. R was absolutely gorgeous, so me being me, I would often ask her for a pencil or a question so I could talk to her. She didn't seem to be as enthusiastic about me as I was about her, but I thought maybe I wasn't on my game or something. I was 17. Give me a break. We were also in totally different cliques, so we didn't know each other very well. I had heard things about her and obviously knew her name, but that was pretty much it. Everyone said she was really nice and sweet, and man, did she live up to it. The days went on, but this little thing never grew past classmates. R was just the girl that sat in front of me. Every day I'd go to class, maybe say hello, find my seat, and that'd be it. She wasn't any more than an acquaintance, and that was fine with me. One day I came into class, and sitting in my seat was this girl who I hated and immediately started arguing with me about political stuff. What was the argument about, you ask? Not important. The thing was, though, that this little back and forth turned into a 5 versus 1 when all her friends joined in. Unfortunately, I was the only one in my friend group in my class that day, so I was getting cornered fast. Even my math teacher was getting into it. As tensions rose, so did the emotions. The argument was growing uncontrollably and eventually veered off into a path that had a lot to do with depression and anxiety. This topic was super sensitive for me because I was on medication and hadn't told anyone about it. I'd like to say that at most 3 people knew and swore never to tell. I did a pretty good job of hiding it, so when they started talking to me about the subject like I was some ignorant a-hole, I got pretty upset. This is the moment that R started talking and was being super defensive, and she seemed really knowledgeable of the subject. That didn't change the fact that we were just going off at each other. Gosh darn, that girl really ticked me off. She made everything I said seem like I didn't care about people on medication. Eventually, the argument led to me saying something along the lines of, "You shouldn't have to depend on pills. They should just help your bettering process." R took it as something completely different, thinking I said, "If you take pills, then you aren't really you." She took it really, really hard and called me some names and broke down crying. Stunned, I stopped myself from saying too much more because it took me back so much. I'd never seen R so full of emotion, so I knew maybe I hit a little too close to home for her. I've made girls upset before, but not like that. The arguing stopped pretty soon after, and soon the bell rang. Everyone got up and simply went to their next class. On to something else like nothing had ever happened, but not for me. I was feeling weird about the whole situation for the day and couldn't even really sleep. Is she depressed too? I asked myself. I never met anyone else who struggled with what I did. The next day, I woke up with it on my mind, so I knew I had to fix the little mess I made. When I came to class the next day, something was different. The seat in front of me was now empty. R had requested to change seats so I could no longer just tap her shoulder like I used to. This little variable was enough for me to leave it alone. I figured if she couldn't even sit by me, then she sure as hell doesn't want to talk to me. This continued for like 2 weeks before I couldn't stand it anymore and finally decided to message her about it. The weird thing was, when I asked her about it, she said she didn't even remember the argument. I'm not the brightest, but I know you don't just forget a moment with a heightened emotion like that. I wanted to press, but instead, I told her to forget about it. Things weren't ever the same with us, and we were left instead with this awkward, hate-filled aura that floated around us when we were around each other. I figured that was all it was ever going to be, or so I thought. Fast forward to the start of senior year, the very first day. I was pretty excited and ready for all my new classes. Each class was filled with more and more of my friends all the way up to my last class, foods/nutrition. It was 2 hours long. As I waddled in a little late, and in front of me were only a few tables to sit at, 3 of the 5 of them were completely full and had a few people I knew, so I was kind of screwed. I looked to my left. There sat 2 super weird kids I did not get along with. Guess that's not an option. I looked right towards the last table and see 2 girls I don't really know, so I start heading that way. But at the last second, I had noticed I must not have seen the 3rd person at the table. It was R. Immediately, I turned around thinking there's no way in hell I'm going to sit by her. Realizing the other table was possibly the worst seat in the history of the world, I looked down, sighed, turned, and sat down at R's table. You could actually feel the uncomfortableness as we made eye contact and both looked down. That's exactly my luck to be put in the situation. Then guess what? The teacher tells us that we'd better like our seats because they are permanent. Wow. We were both unhappy, but there was nothing to be done. All there was to do was to suck it up and get over it. As days went past, our little frizz sort of died out a little. We definitely still hated each other, but started talking again. We were at the same kitchen for cooking too, so we didn't really have a choice. Our conversations eventually grew more and more until one day something happened that changed everything. Our class often had times to go on your computer and do things like a worksheet or something. While I worked, I always had music playing in my headphones. Always. I didn't listen to what everyone else did though, and it kind of sucked. Actually, no. It really sucked. Listening to punk rock music wasn't really common. I liked bands like With Confidence, Sleeping with Sirens, All Time Low, and a few others. It was hard finding music like that when no one I knew actually liked it. I mean, there were songs that I would show my friends and they'd end up liking it, but never felt like someone actually had the same taste in music as me. I'm a hopeless romantic, so don't cringe when I say I've always dreamed of meeting that girl that likes my music and is, like sort of a badass and just understood exactly what that kind of music does to you. But let's push that thought aside. It was just some backstory for what's coming up. I had to start a new paragraph because thinking about it just gave me the chills. Ugh. Sorry, I'm writing this trying to get all that stuff that goes through my brain. I don't know why I tell stories like this, but if you've made it this far, then maybe it's not too bad. Nothing was out of the ordinary on that day. It was boring and just kind of, there. 2 hours left is all I could think. I was already sick of school and each day was getting worse. Teacher says to us that we have free time to work on homework, so I pull out my computer and immediately grab my headphones. The homework was table-based, so we had to work together, and at this point, R being at the table didn't bother me much, so I decided to ask her for help. She looked a little confused. We didn't really talk at this point, but still. She helped me anyways. A few minutes in, I noticed she had headphones in too. I hesitated and asked her what she was listening to. She almost hesitated too, seeming embarrassed. I smiled a little smile, and she was like, "Well, they aren't that popular, so you might not know any of their songs." I peeked over and took a look at the screen. It might sound stupid and not that big of a deal, but seeing her playlist and knowing almost all of the songs, I could not believe it. I looked at her and I was like, "What? You know these bands?" Her eyes locked with mine and she said, "You know these bands?" I don't even know how to put it into words. It was like lightning. The rest of that class, we showed each other song after song after song, talking about them and pointing out the best parts only pushed us deeper and deeper into our own little bubble. We had been so lost in each other that sure enough, the bell goes off and we didn't even notice. We were both taken a little off guard, so we just sort of hurried and went home. I couldn't even sleep that night because the rest of my night, she was all I could think about. I mean, where can I even start? This girl drove me crazy all this time, and all of a sudden, this? I eventually fell asleep, and all I remember the next day is being crazy nervous. What if I tried to talk and she didn't care anymore? I guess I didn't mind much since we didn't really like each other, but as soon as I got there, it picked up just where we'd left off. R said something to me though that I'd never forget. Once we got back into music, she had this frustrated look on her face when I showed her a new song. Apparently, she'd already heard the song and really liked it. Then out of nowhere, she goes, "Ugh, why does it have to be you that likes all this music?" At that moment, I knew she was thinking the exact same thing I was. I had a dumb smile on my face for so long after that. Each day got more and more interesting. I learned that she used to think that I was a major a-hole who only cared about myself, and I told her I thought she was a B, so it actually worked out kind of well. Every time she opened her mouth, it was like angelic music I couldn't get away from. Whether we were sharing headphones to hear new music, or even just nonstop laughing about something dumb in the kitchen, there wasn't a single dull moment with her. It even got to the point where I actually wanted to go to school in the morning. The days where she was absent felt so empty to me. It was so disappointing, and I think the other girls even noticed it too. I always wondered if she felt the same way when I was gone. There's no way a girl like that would think of me like that, I thought to myself. I kept asking myself this until I learned that I was taking a class trip and was going to be gone for a few days. The day before the trip, I said to my table that I'd be gone for 2 days, and R immediately had a face of just, I don't know really, sadness? It was so genuine, and she was like, "What? No," but tried to play it off right away after. I smiled at her, and she looked back, and it was like we could read each other's minds. From that point on, I knew we were both in the situation of being drawn to each other with nothing that we could do about it. I never officially said it, but I had the biggest crush on this girl, and I think she had one on me too. There was only one thing that was keeping us apart, something that was way more than enough for either of us to act on. She had a boyfriend. She started dating him in the summer, and they were pretty in love. This guy had been her first everything, so I knew it wasn't some random schlub. Honestly, the guy was kind of a D to her. He'd come to class, pull her shirt up if her cleavage was showing, and just sort of talk down to her. You could see it in her eyes when he hurt her, and it was hard to watch sometimes. I wanted to try to comfort her, but I knew it was pointless. I think he caught on to me and her talking and would stand in between us, even halfway through our conversation, so we'd have to stop. I tried to say as much as I could to her before he'd come to her at the end of class. He was usually the end to our fun every day, but I didn't mind. Even talking with her for a minute made my day. Remember how I said R was really sweet? Well, she was, but she had a side to her I never knew about. Our teacher sometimes played favorites and would let some kids on their phones and others not. On this day, she decided that R was the one to not be on her phone. In less than a second, R had this fire in her that I could almost feel just by looking at her. She snapped back and they got into an argument that lasted only a few words. Those arguments started occurring often, and to be completely real, they made me like her even more. I'd argue with a teacher or two if I knew they were being unfair, and apparently she did too. I don't think I've even told her that I liked it, which sucks, but there's not much I can do now. As the semester drew to an end, I realized things with this girl would never turn into anything. I had gotten a girlfriend, her boyfriend and her had gotten even closer, and we weren't going to see each other in class anymore. The days that we had were incredible, but at the same time so depressing because we both knew that it was going to end. I don't know how we both knew, but somehow we did. As we said our goodbyes, I'd always hoped maybe it wasn't our last goodbye, that maybe once, just once, we'd be able to talk again. I haven't talked to her since, and it's been about 3 years. Although we didn't talk, I never lost hope. I saw her at a party about a year after, but we didn't talk to each other. I looked up to see if she was looking at me a few times, but she never was, so I didn't think to approach her. As a hopeless romantic, I thought to myself, maybe it was like one of those movie scenes where I look up, and as I look away, she looks, and we never get to have the connection I was dying for. That R wants just as bad as me to look. I wish I knew the answer to that, but I don't know if I ever will. I still listen to the songs she showed me and wonder if she listens to mine. I'm left sitting here with this empty feeling, and I don't know what to do with it. I guess that's why I went to Reddit to let go of my thoughts and quit bottling everything up. So yeah, that's basically my story. A guy and a girl who hated each other that never thought they'd end up being friends. I know it doesn't have a happy ending, but not every story is a fairy tale. Maybe one day, but not today. I wish today. She made my heart melt in a way I'll never forget. And that's enough for me. Hopeless. The alarm rang. 6:30 a.m. He turned it off and looked up at the ceiling. Am I living or surviving, he thought. After all, working 12 hours a day and going to college on the remaining time is not much of a life. I managed to get up after some time. He checked the time on his phone. 6:53. He's going to be late again. His boss will complain about him. This is a bad day after all, maybe the worst of the year, he talks to himself as he gets ready to leave without any emotion. He manages to get out of the house eventually. His house is 4 minutes from the bus stop. Time is around 7:20. He's not running because the bus goes around 7:28 at that stop. Just when I'm getting to the street, the bus goes by. It's too far to make it running. It's hopeless anyway. He's starting to think he's going to get busted. He's starting to think about it. He starts thinking about why he does this, why he cares. He works at a crappy job that barely pays the bills anyway. His boss is the devil in person. The company buys the workers for $3 an hour and sells them for $15 an hour. He knows it. His position has access to such reports. Every time he remembers that the boss's son is his coworker and he receives better wages than him and doesn't do anything, he gets even more demotivated. He looks at his hand. He looks at his hands and thinks, I'm only here for her. If not for her, I would have left this planet already. He looks around. The bus stop got crowded without him noticing. He looks to the left, and the bus is coming. 7:44. His shift starts at 8 o'clock, and he's only taking the first bus. There's 2 more to go after this one. The bus stops. He gets in. Bus is crowded. The rest of the people get in too. The bus feels like a tuna can. He observes his surroundings. There are people talking and laughing, people on the phone texting. Everyone seems so happy. Even the bus is at least 1 double maximum capacity. He sneaks his hand into his backpack. It's a hard task since he can barely move his arms. He grabs his headphones, plugs them in. Life gets 2% better. He does not hear the useless talking now. He's isolated. The bus arrives at the terminal. He rushes towards the next one. Just as before, another tuna can. It's midwinter. He left home with 2 coats. However, the amount of people produces extreme amounts of human heat. He's sweating already. He takes off the coats as he walks onto the bus. It's 8:03 already, and he's far from work. He's gotten to a point where he doesn't care anymore. Today is a bad day after all, just like yesterday. Time goes by. The bus leaves the terminal at 8:10. He is 10 minutes late already. The bus leaves only to stop a couple of meters ahead. Traffic. Intense traffic. It's peak hour. The city's grown insanely in population in the last 10 years. No roads were planned. Average speed is 20 kilometers an hour. His bus needs to cross the city to get to the other terminal. He feels like a gasoline doll. The bus starts and stops every 50 meters. His body waves left and right. This goes for about 30 minutes when he finally makes it to the other terminal. 8:40 now. He goes to where the last bus stops, looks at the board for the bus schedule. Last one left 8:35. Next one is 9:15 a.m. He's not mad, not sad. He does not feel anything at all. He feels empty, with zero motivation and will. He sits and waits, watching people go by. There he is, an empty human being watching other empty human beings rushing towards their work just as he is. Maybe I shouldn't complain that much, is the thought that revolves around his mind. He just snaps out of his thoughts, gets a piece of paper and a pen, and then starts drawing the terminal structure. He starts with the pillars, big black metal bars, then proceeds to the ceiling, metal bars installed in some kind of web shape. There are iron bars everywhere. He draws the signs. His bus arrives. He checks the time and it's 9:13. He hops inside the bus and gets a seat. This is the only bus that does not feel like a pressure cooker. He gives a small smile and remembers that he is hungry. Maybe that's why he made so many analogies with food. The bus starts and leaves the terminal. He's almost to hell. How I meet again. So I don't really know how to title this. Let me just begin. Back when I was a kid, I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. I loved it there till I was in the 6th grade. I moved around a lot too. The neighbor which I'm talking about owned a 2-story house next to my family's 1-story house. We lived in that house for a total of 3 years and then moved to a new neighborhood. During these 3 years, me and my brother rarely went outside. Our parents didn't like the idea. Besides, studying to them was a higher priority than anything else, as they were first-generation immigrants and preferred us to get a good education. Anyway, here's where things get interesting. Our parents decided to go to Los Angeles, California. Fine by us. We didn't quite care where we lived, although it was difficult to say goodbye to all of those friends. After having lived 2 years in California, my mom decided to sign me and my brother up for an acting camp. There, I attended the 13 and under class, while my brother attended the 13 and older class. One of the days, we had an exercise where 2 people would tell a story, one made up and one real. Me and another guy convinced the teacher to let us both tell a true story. The story I chose coincidentally took place the few times I went outside in that neighborhood which I lived in for 3 years. In the story, I, for some reason, named both the city and state I lived in as well as the neighborhood. One of the girls who was in my class had around 10 people, asked me after the fact came out that both stories were true. Firstly, she asked where I lived in that neighborhood. I told her right before the speed bump. Then she asked if my family grew things in our backyard, to which I replied that was true too. And lastly, she asked if I had gone outside with my brother to play before, and I replied that was true as well. And as such, I managed to meet my neighbor who I never knew until now across the country in a small acting camp in a class of roughly 10 students. At first, I couldn't believe it myself. Maybe I'd forgotten the actual name of the neighborhood and simply agreed with her because it sounded familiar. But everything she described was accurate. Her house was indeed 2 stories and ours 1. We did indeed live with our grandparents. Me and my brother did indeed go outside sometimes. The addresses matched. The city and states matched. Of course, I was pretty dumbfounded with such a coincidence. What are the odds that 2 kids' parents decide to move across the country to, albeit a popular city, to roughly the same region in the city and sign their children up the same year to the same small acting camp? And what are the odds that I tell that story out of the many which I could have told? And the odds that I listed the city and state where I lived? Oh, and the girl pretty blatantly tried to flirt with me during that class. Didn't particularly like her, but she definitely had a crush on me. Quite touchy, if you know what I mean. This is just some extra info at this point. When we did some games, she liked clinging to me or talking with me every chance she got. I was actually turning 13 very soon during that camp, and as such was far more mature than the 10 or 11-year-olds in that class. I still remember one girl sitting in my lap against my protests because she wanted to win a game. Boy, did I feel flustered then. Well, it's always cool to reflect on the past. Get that type of immaturity going again. Just thinking about it makes me think about luck and how awkward I was back then. Sad story from my life. I come back to school after the Christmas holidays, and we have a new girl in our class. We don't talk much at first, since she seems pretty introverted. Soon, she joins my friend group, and we start talking a lot more. I discover she's a gamer girl, and we transition into talking a lot on Discord, too. We talk a lot, sometimes 4 to 6 hours on calls until 2 a.m. I get to know her. She seems really nice, and I get an illusion that I might have a chance of dating her. We carry on being friends for a month with a small, insignificant argument here and there, about things like not caring about each other or not being honest when we annoy each other. We get pretty close and become best friends. She tells me things about her never having a crush, which is understandable since she's young and gets on better with boys than girls. Anyway, we kind of start arguing more frequently for stupid reasons. I admit I was responsible for about half, but once we get that far, she wants to end the friendship, and I go along. We have a pretty deep discussion ending in us realizing we can't replace each other and realizing we have to let go. She asked things like, "Why do you care for me?" So far, we've only been arguing online and acting normal or avoiding each other in real life. Well, that was about to change. The next morning, she messages me with the idea of, let's not talk over messages and just talk in real life, since everything's okay in real life. I go along since I don't want to lose her as a friend, and that argument was generally stupid. So everything goes normal for the next couple of weeks, and 1 week, it gets serious. It was a normal day at school. I came back home and I felt that things were different. We didn't talk much now because of the arguments. I really didn't enjoy being with her, and I decided to write her some message describing how attached I was, how two-faced she acted, acting normal in real life, but then saying dumb stuff in arguments, how much I didn't want to argue, and that something had to change. Well, it turned out to be a 960-word message. Her response was pathetic. Furthermore, I found out she was annoyed by me expressing my emotions. For time's sake, I can summarize her response. Okay, don't suppress your emotions. I didn't expect this. I expected some kind of understanding. Once again, one morning, we get into some argument. She explains her lack of interest as a lack of human emotion when I tried to understand what is wrong with her, like what I did wrong. I didn't understand why we didn't understand each other. Things were about to escalate. Right now, I feel clueless and very confused, not knowing what the best thing to do is. I keep messaging her and trying to figure things out, to understand her at the very least. We get to a very dodgy area. She starts saying things like, "You think I would ask for someone to care about me? No, I want everyone to forget about me, so I can finally effing kill myself without hurting anyone." That was when things started to head south. I took it as some sort of joke at first. She joked about suicide a lot before, but now I was a bit concerned. Later, she sends the message of, "You want to see my arm? Oh no, you will think it's an attention-seeking thing." I go along. She sends a pic of her arm scratched to near bleeding. As I later found out, it's not the first year of her doing this. Just before, it wasn't as severe. I felt bad like anyone would. The same day after school, I message her that I feel bad. I know it wasn't because of me, but the least I could have done is be there for you and not annoy you with arguments. My feelings didn't matter at that point because she was my best friend for a while and I wanted to help. We message a bit. She's very hostile. I want to help. She doesn't take it. I ask why she says it's none of my business. It was my business. If it wasn't, I wouldn't feel bad. She says, just because I showed you a picture of my arm, you don't have to start pretending you feel bad for me. Introduce SB, suicide buddy, or her now best friend. SB is a 13 to 14-year-old male that attempted suicide last year in the previous grade and is now her best friend. She said things like, because if I died, you wouldn't care. I just need to get my family to stop caring. Then, SB, then I can be free. Is that enough escalation? No? It's about to get much worse. From the previous conversation, I realized she was really suicidal or was trying to fake it. It seemed fake to me at the time because she had no reason to do it. She had friends, she had family. Turns out, she had to go to a therapist a couple of years ago for the same reason. I still don't know. Probably those scratches were from a year ago. She tells me she's a very morbid person and there's nothing wrong. I start realizing that I can't help her. I'm clueless about what to do, so me, being the idiot I am, keep messaging her. It's us discussing how she was a B to me, and she's agreeing, discussing how she's very fake, and her incapability to feel human emotions like remorse, happiness, and love. I realize she's been through many things and that I am helpless and nothing can change her past. The only thing that can be changed is her attitude. It's never late to start again. Trust people again, feel happy again. I explained this to her as a last-ditch attempt. Well, guess what? That only made her laugh, and it backfired on me. Backfired on me, you'd ask? Yes. We were discussing how I didn't know what led to this lifestyle when out of the blue she sends me an interesting image. An image of a girl ran over by a truck with all her vital organs just out in the open. I feel disgusted by just remembering it. She found it interesting from a biological point of view. Being very creeped out, I try to explain how she's not normal, how looking at those kinds of things isn't okay. I ask her, what if she was that girl? And this is what frightened me the most in her response. She said, what dies or experiences the pain? If I deserved the pain, I'd do it. The next couple of days was us arguing about her being sociopathic, feeding on people's emotions and having a lot in common with SB. SB is even more effed up than her. According to one of my friends, they watch strange types of hentai together. The next day, I come home to about 20 messages, reading something like, how do you want me to kill myself? I tell her I don't want her to die. I regret knowing her and that I hope she becomes normal, but without me being her best friend. This escalates to her sending more of those images, which I prefer not to describe. It's some not safe for life content. I don't know where she got them from, and I'm grateful she stopped sending them. Furthermore, it gets out of hand to the point where she begs me not to tell the school about it, because she doesn't want to go to a therapist again. 3 days later, last day of school before quarantine, we message under the table in class for a bit. I got some emotions out of her. I made her realize what kind of person she is, and she admitted. However, she is too weak to change and has adapted to this lifestyle. To conclude, what I'm left with is someone I wish I had never met in my friend group. Someone I had feelings for, but now every thought of her makes me feel disgusted. Thanks to the quarantine, I don't have to see her anytime soon. What do you guys think?
Mom. There's one in every high school, an activity that everyone does for months on end, a fad everyone talks about, and if you aren't doing it, you don't get to participate in the conversation. I'm not talking about drugs or sex, I'm talking about scaring each other. For months in my high school, all anyone could talk about was the haunted houses they visited over the weekends. Jeff floated up the stairs. You could hear the woman crying out for her children. I called bullshit on all of their stories. Even the ones people clearly thought they experienced, figuring it was faulty wiring or old houses settling. I wasn't too interested in their stupidity, but little did I know I was about to experience things for myself, unwillingly. I'm from a very small town in the upper Midwest. My childhood home was literally in the middle of nowhere. Our closest neighbor was about a mile away. The home I grew up in until I was 14 was a rental. Then my parents bought some land and moved a huge old Victorian farmhouse onto it. The house hadn't been occupied in several years, probably decades. The last person who owned it wanted it off his property so the cows could roam free on the land. I still don't know when the house was built, but the original basement had a sign that it was 1909 was the year they installed the furnace, so sometime before that. After the house was moved, there were some repairs that needed to be done before we could move in. It was months before we were able to put anything into it. The first night we actually got to stay there was when I realized my family was not the only ones living in it. My parents picked me up from a school function late on a Saturday. The new house was kind of on the way to the old house, so when my dad turned on the road to go to the new house, I asked, "Where are we going?" To which my dad just smiled. I kindly reminded him that I had the clothes on my back and nothing else to say at the new house. We took a detour back to the old house, grabbing the essentials: toothbrush, pajamas, books, posters. We headed back to the new house. I spent the remainder of my evening putting up the posters I had saved from numerous magazines of cute boys and even cuter animals. I hadn't put them up in the old house, not wanting to rip them down to put in the new house. I listened to music and set up my room for a while before going to bed. Before I go any further, I need to give you a layout of sorts of this house. There are 4 levels: basement, main floor, upstairs, attic. The basement is basically a large living area with the laundry area, no bedrooms down there. The main level is kitchen, dining room, living room, fancy living room, small bathroom. Upper level is 4 bedrooms with a second full bathroom. Attic is a big open space. My parents gave me the option to have my bedroom in the attic or have the master bedroom on the 2nd floor since I would be moving out in a few years. I chose the actual bedroom because I want the closet. The attic never creeped me out. I seriously considered taking it as my room, but I'm a closet girl. What could I say? When you walk up the stairs to the left is my sister's room and my room because they are both the biggest. On the right is a smaller spare bedroom, my brother's room, and the bathroom between the 2 rooms. The hallway is very wide, and at the end of the hallway is a door to the upper level of the porch. When we first moved in, there was no porch yet, so the door led to a long drop onto a rocky driveway. The master bedroom is huge, almost a perfect square. Since I had not been able to set up my room that day, my sister and her friend set it up for me. They put my dresser by the door, the desk by the window, and the bed on the opposite side of the room from the door. They did a pretty good job. I just had to personalize it, so I turned on some music and shut my door so anyone trying to sleep wouldn't hear. My brother's room is right across the wide hall from mine. His bed was right next to his bedroom door, and his door was cracked open just a bit. By the time I went to bed, everyone else in the house was sleeping. I was just falling asleep in my new bed at the new house when I woken by a whisper. "Mom, Mom." Like when you're little and you wake up in the middle of the night to find you wet the bed or thrown up all over yourself, so you go get your mom and whisper right next to her ear. That's what I heard. I opened my eyes to see nothing. I had cracked open my bedroom door just a tiny bit to allow the hall light to seep in, just in case I woke up and needed to use the bathroom without having to turn on the lights. My closet door was also open about 3 inches. There was no one there who could have whispered. Confused, I fell back asleep thinking it was probably my brother who woke up and being 7 in the new house for the first time was disoriented about what was going on. I didn't say anything to anyone at first, but after I thought more about it, there was no possible way I could have heard my brother whisper from that far away. I couldn't stop thinking about the strange whisper and who it could have been. Also, I'd like to remind you, I now occupy the master bedroom where my parents of the previous family most likely slept. Finally, I told my mom. To my surprise, she didn't dismiss me or tell me I was hearing things or that the house was probably settling. She paused just a second, most likely trying to decide if I was mature enough to handle what she was about to tell me, and said, "I've heard it too." The Silhouette. If you've watched Mom, great. If you haven't, I highly recommend watching it before this to have a better understanding of I'm sure these thoughts went through her mind. Does she want to scare the shit out of me, or should she just leave it alone and let me figure things out for myself? She chose option A. I also think she was relieved someone else had experienced something, so she wasn't alone and thought she was just hearing strange voices. She had been under a lot of stress to get the house ready for her family to live in, staying up well into the night at the house, got up to get us ready for school, still had a job, and took at least 2 hours out of every day to do some sort of cardio. She was superwoman. No wonder she may have thought she was just hearing things. Lack of sleep alone will do that to a person. In the winter, my mom rode her stationary bike in the living room after we all went to school. It was loud and obnoxious, so she had to turn on the TV up to a ridiculous volume to be able to hear it over the bike. This was why she preferred to be at home alone when she rode it, so she didn't disrupt everyone else in the house. This was when my mom heard the whisper, "Mom, Mom." She heard it over the loud bike and the loud TV. So she left the upstairs hall light on. They happened to run into the electrician who worked on the house before we moved into it. He had quite the story for them. If my parents were working on the house, it was open and unlocked. You could get from the basement to the attic, no problem. When my parents weren't there, but crews were working on it, they only had access to the basement. The electrician was making a few changes and checks one evening, making sure all was working properly. He had been in and out of the basement, looking at lights and whatnot. He was outside making sure the yard light was going to come on once it got dark enough, and happened to look up at the house and see the silhouette of a child in an upstairs bedroom. He was there alone with no crew members or their children, and didn't even have access to the main level, let alone the second floor. He was clearly shaken up by it and was relieved when my mom said she had also seen a similar silhouette in the window of the door at the end of the hall. He said it wasn't in the hall window, it was in the bedroom to the right. My bedroom. Elliot. So it's been a while since I've been able to continue my story. Sorry. If you're seeing this part for the first time, you should probably go back and watch Mom and the Silhouette, because this might not make any sense if you don't. If you had watched them both, you are aware of the child haunting the home I grew up in. He's been spotted and heard. Now I'd like to tell you about a little research my mom did after I told her about the creepy whisper I heard the first night we stayed here. I mentioned my parents moved the house onto some land they purchased. The previous owner was an elderly man who ended up in hospice care, unable to carry on a conversation for too long. When my mom went to visit him, she realized she was not going to get very far by talking to him. He couldn't even remember who she was. No biggie, there are records and death certificates, right? Well, sort of. She ended up finding a small cemetery near the location the house was originally standing. It was a small family one, overgrown and hard to find, but there was a grave that was marked Elliot. The marker said the child died at 6. That seemed about right. A 6-year-old would behave the way our ghost was behaving, but why had Elliot died? In the early 1900s, kids died in their sleep because of numerous things that doctors back then didn't even know about. Simple diseases we're now vaccinated for were terminal back then. Sad, I know. Not completely satisfied with her findings, my mom headed to the library to see what else she could find. Records weren't kept as well as they are today back then, but she did find something. There was a small obituary on a child named Elliot who was said to be about 4 years old. Okay, now what are the chances of a child around the same age, with the same name, dying around the same time on the same property? I think someone messed up on the age or year Elliot died. Either way, Elliot didn't go where they were supposed to go. Not knowing if Elliot is a boy or girl, I have a feeling he's a boy, so from here on, I will call him a he. My mother had to be content with her search for the time being. There are now no living relatives to ask, so we have to rely on records even though there may not be totally accurate. It's a bummer. I'm curious about this child. Why is he still here? What does he need? How can we help him? I have no idea. Not that I didn't try. After that first night of hearing him whisper, I kept the closet door closed, not wanting him to wake me up again. I spent a few evenings in my closet on a beanbag chair trying to talk to him and getting no response. I had some luck with the Ouija board at a friend's birthday party once. I suppose you like to hear that story, and since it's somewhat relevant, here, I'll tell you. My best friend from childhood had lost her grandmother to a heart attack very suddenly when we were in 4th grade. As a 4th grader, those things aren't understood fully like they are when you're older. It really hit her a few years later when she finally realized what had happened, and she got super bummed she hadn't been able to say goodbye. That's when one of us suggested a spirit board. What's the worst that could happen? In our case, her grandma can visit us, and that's exactly what happened. Throughout the night, I had been constantly pulling my hair behind my ear when my grown-out bangs got in my face. Typical 13-year-old, but I wasn't able to push them out of my face since my fingers were glued to the planchette where we were summoning the spirit. I was looking down at the board waiting for words to be spelled out when my hair was gently scooped out of my face and placed behind my ear, much like a grandmother would do for her granddaughter. After what seemed like several minutes, I looked at my friend who was crying. We all immediately took our fingers off the board to console her. Admittedly, a little freaked out, my friend said she was able to say goodbye to her grandma because she had appeared in the corner and smiled at her. She was the only one who saw her, but I told her she had put my hair back behind my ear for me. She had been a wonderful lady, and it wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for her to do that for me. That was before my encounter with Elliot. If my only other spiritual experience had been a less pleasant one, I may have been more apprehensive about the whisper. And since it had been a successful one, I decided to have some friends over and try it myself. We got nothing. Not even a glimmer. Maybe it's because he wasn't related to any of us, or he was just hiding or shy. We will never know. I didn't hear him again while I lived there. That doesn't mean he didn't announce his presence, but that's another story for another day. Keep creepin', peeps. How losing my mother saved my life. My mother died a little over 2 years ago on October 31st of 2016. It was sudden and sort of unexpected. But then when does one look at death as expected? I digress. Apologies, reader, I tend to ramble. Kudos to you if you get to the end, and it's a bit of a long, painful story, but I feel it's important as well as therapeutic to tell. I moved away from my family, my mom especially, since she and I were the closest, about 3 years ago. My mom was of course sad to see me go, but knew it was best for my family. So I moved, and unbeknownst to me, my mother neglected her own health to care for my asshole male DNA donor and my autistic but amazingly intelligent younger brother. So she got sick. Really sick. Like rushed to the hospital and into the ICU kind of sick. I'm my mother's POA, so I was notified, and she called me to tell me not to panic. So I panicked. Big time. She tells me she had a hard time breathing one day, so my brother tried to convince her to go to the ER. And it got so bad that she got scared and called 911. Saved her life. For a little while. Turns out my mother had a severe case of pneumonia. She smoked. I had suspected for years she had COPD, and she knew but wouldn't tell me. So okay, pneumonia. I work in the medical field. I know it's serious but treatable, and she's obviously doing okay if she's calling me, right? Except at the end, she drops the bombshell. They found cancer on her chest CT. My mother had cancer. That was the first time in the next few weeks my world would shift on its axis. This was October 10th. So I cry and I freak out, but when the nurse takes over and I start asking about stages, type, treatment plans, scans, etc., she was very vague, but told me it was bad. She had met with an oncologist and was going to do chemo. So I relaxed a little, figured it was gonna suck, but we would get through this. The next weeks went by in a blur. I spoke to my mother daily, usually on my ride to work to see how chemo went, how she was feeling, etc. I had made a trip home 2 days after I found out, thanks to some amazing friends and family that helped me and my husband get there. So I laid eyes on her, judged for myself how bad I thought it was. I called her after her chemo appointment, Thursday, October 27th. She was feeling okay, but very tired, so we didn't talk long. I could recall exactly where I was on my drive and what song on Pandora I paused to talk to her. Her last words to me were "bless you for ringing." My mother was British and very verbally proper, so that was her typical goodbye. I hung up from that call not knowing that that would be the last time I heard her voice. Everything was going okay from then up until October 29th. My world shifted again. I got a frantic email from my brother. He doesn't like phones, stating our mother was in the hospital and something about papers that if her heart stopped again, that they couldn't restart it and I needed to call the hospital. so I have a feeling of absolute dread sinking in. It's 10 o'clock at night. What is going on? I call the hospital and find out she is in the ER. Okay, she got sick. Let's talk to charge to find out why. I actually got to talk to the ER doctor that told me my mother was intubated and unconscious in the ER. Cue panic attack. My mother had gotten sick at home, vomited, and we think she aspirated or inhaled her vomit. Bad times. My poor brother called 911 and they came to their house and resuscitated her. But she had suffered brain damage or something because she wouldn't wake up. Then the really bad shocking news. My mother signed a DNR, or do not resuscitate, which means she had legal papers saying that they had to remove the tube and let her go. My mother didn't tell anyone. It wasn't until they got her to the hospital and pulled her records they knew. I am over 800 miles away, and this doctor is saying he has to let my mother die. I am sobbing at this point, begging him to keep it long enough for me to get home to see her. He refused, saying it was her wish to go. I had no choice but to agree. So I went to bed thinking my mother died that night. I called the hospital the next day expecting the news, but my mother was still alive. My hopes soared. My mom is a fighter. The nurse tells me she still isn't conscious. I told her to tell my mom, hang on, I'm coming. I made the 12-hour plus drive home to get to the hospital to see my mother. I got there at 1 a.m. on October 31st, Halloween, my favorite holiday. The third time my world shifted on its axis was sitting in the hospital parking lot preparing to go see my mother. Walking into the hospital was surreal, like I was watching some other daughter walk down the hall to her mother's ICU room. One thing about ICU is how quiet they can be. I stopped at the nurse's desk, told them who I was and who I was there to see. The nurse gave me a sympathetic look and took me to her room. The second I stepped foot in her doorway, I knew my mother was gone. A husk of her lay in that hospital bed, truly one of the most horrific things I have ever seen. Her body struggled to live, these horrible gasping respirations. She was gone, but her body was still here. Meds kept her blood pressure up enough to sustain life. I wanted to rip it all off of her. This wasn't right. I knew my brother needed to be there to say goodbye, so I sat by my mother's bedside alone for 9 hours watching her gasp for air. Her body had shut down, except her heart, lungs, and a tiny portion of brain. It was the worst thing I ever had to do, but I talked to her, told her about my babies and how excited they were to trick or treat. My brother and asshole got to the hospital around 9:30. My mom's oncologist met me before they got there and dropped the bombshell the cancer my mom had was ovarian, with mets everywhere, and she recommended I get tested for the gene that increases risks. I just kind of nodded in shock. I signed the papers to take my mom off all medical support shortly after she left. Once my brother and asshole got there, the nurse took all the machines and lines off, and I held her hands as they gave her meds to make her comfortable. My mother died October 31st at 10:07 in the morning. My whole world fell off its axis. I was now the caretaker of my family, and I had to figure out how to be her. I got things as situated as I could in the 3 days I could stay, arranged her cremation as she wanted, and ended up paying for it because the asshole left her life insurance lapse. I grieved the loss of my mother heavily and had to scramble to take care of my brother and asshole. To say I was stressed and busy was an understatement. I put the oncologist warning out in my head, until almost 2 years later when I had pain in my abdomen. Then suddenly her warning popped in my head. I had blood work done and found out I do carry that gene that increases my cancer risk, right as my own doctor finds a mass on my ovary. Cue world shift again. My doctor immediately orders more scans and schedules me for surgery rather than do a biopsy and wait. I'm on board with this idea, so I went in for surgery December of last year. My doctor found a suspicious mass on my left ovary. He removed both ovaries, both tubes, and mass. The biopsy on the mass actually came back benign, but on my other ovary, the one with no visible mass, they found stage 1 cancer. I had ovarian cancer and had no idea. By doing the surgery, the surgeon actually caught it early. If my mother had not died of ovarian cancer and her doctor told me to get genetically tested, I would not have known I had it until it was too late. Ovarian cancer spreads quickly, and usually by the time it's found, like my mother, it's too late. My blood test result pushed my doctor to do more than biopsy, and removing both ovaries, he caught the real threat. My mother's death saved my life, along with the BRCA gene test. I cannot stress enough that everyone should get that test to find out your cancer risks. Knowledge is power, especially in healthcare. I have sent my mother's oncologist flowers every year on her birthday and Halloween.
Hi, I'm Susan. I'm going to tell you a story which occurred a couple of years ago when I was 19 years old, but still remains in my mind because it can never be forgotten. It was indeed an event that can never be forgotten. I lived a life in a family which consisted of 4 children, 2 guys and 2 ladies, which I happened to be one amongst those ladies. I was the oldest in my family because I happened to be the firstborn of the family. Right within me, I knew that I had a whole lot of responsibilities on me. My life from the beginning was very fun, and I grew up living with my family, friends, and my neighbors, though there were a lot of ups and downs then in my family, but I was very hyperactive back then. I was very hyper and wouldn't stop moving around the place from one joint to another. I was so not back then and always ever seemed to get my homework done at school. I was born at Kaiser Hospital. The first place I lived was on the street via Harriet and was right next to a train station. It was fun and so much annoying listening to the sound of arriving trains then. It was always noisy when the train passed by because it will shake the house and scared all the animals in the surroundings. It wasn't the best place to live, but as time goes, we eventually moved to the hills, where we never experienced the noise of a train again. I have never for once really thought about where my life was going. All I know was that I'm the firstborn of the house, and I'm sure I have a lot of responsibilities on me. I always believed life took me where I wanted to go. I never thought that I was the one who took myself where I wanted to go. After we moved to our new apartment on the hills, my parents decided to change the school I attended because it would be too stressful going to my former school from my current location. Immediately I entered the high school, my mentality about life changed. This is why I chose to go to college when I was asked which school I would love to go. I believe that college will give me the keys to unlock the doors of life. This way, I can choose for myself where I go, instead of someone choosing for me. I have chosen to go to the local community college to get used to the college experience. It was on a Monday morning, my first day in my new school. My mom woke me up so early so as to get prepared and not be late for school. I got to school before the assembly started immediately. When the assembly bell was rang, I followed the direction, which a lot of people followed, so as to get to the assembly ground. It's all amazing and awesome. It's all totally different from the way it was held in my previous school. I was really happy and excited. After I got to class, the teaching and the students were all amazing. During the break hour, some female friends came to meet, asking of my name and trying to make friends with me. Now the day is over. We all need to go home. I followed the school bus home so as to get home on time to gist my parent how my day went in my new school. Only for me to get home and discover that my parents are fighting each other again, as usual. I just went into my room quietly and kept to myself all day. College life can be an exciting time, but at the same time, it can be so challenging. I know this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a positive influence in the lives of children. I want to be able to stand up and show the children that it's okay to be yourself and stand up for what you believe in. I am a well-rounded student. For 2 years, I was actively involved in a girls' organization. This experience taught me many things. We were actively involved in community service activities, for which I received the Silver Award, the second highest award in the organization. I was so happy when that award was given to me, reason being that all what I planned for my life is getting achieved, one after the other, and also I'm making my parents proud. I learned about the value of friendship and patience with others. This organization first introduced me to my future career, which was a great plus to my life. I was also involved for 1.5 years in a student government club on college. In this club, I learned many life lessons, one of which was the value of hard work. I was one of the few people that organized the junior-senior prom of 2000. My responsibilities included planning coronation, buying and organizing decorations, planning the busing schedule, booking the photographers, fundraising, etc. This taught me about hard work, but the best part of it was going to prom knowing I was one of the only reasons that made it happen. In my family, it was so much normal to see my parents fighting and throwing things at each other. It has always been a painful moment for me and my siblings anytime we see our parents in such scenario. A case once happened back then which was so serious and critical when my father threw a bottle of beer at my mom's head, and she ended up in the hospital. It was indeed a painful experience because we almost lost my mom back then. My father threw a bottle of beer at her just because she refused to change the television station to his own choice. My mom spent more than a month in the hospital because she landed in a coma after the bottle was thrown at her. A series of money was spent on her before she finally came back to life. After that incident, all we thought was that my dad will come back to his senses and stop the way they both fight each other. But no, reverse is the case. The fighting still continued. Many of these events keep happening in my family, and even our neighbors got tired of settling issues between them. And if it wasn't for the school I and my siblings attend, we don't know how we would have survived all this. So it's time for competition in my class, and the teacher decided to share us into 2 groups. So in my class, there were 2 groups. Each group loved their singers and their sport teams, and yes, I was made the leader in my team. We defended with everything, and also we had our stars. For example, we loved Justin Bieber, and the other group was against us for it. We had a lot of fights with other opponents, and especially after school. To be honest, the other group was a bit weaker than us, reason being that they were much lower in number, and they got no talented person in their midst, but somehow they started to get their strength when we had a new student in our class and the teacher decided to fix her in the other group, and the name of the student was called Barbara. Barbara came from another school for the reasons I don't know, but when she came to our class and she'd been fixed in group 2, she started fighting my teammates every day for no reason. She would take up every little thing that happened. Barbara was a good-looking girl and so much attractive to every male in our class because she got a pretty face and some nice shapes and curves. A lot of guys fight over her just to get her number. Different guys are dying just to talk to her. Barbara becomes so much popular and famous in the college all of a sudden, but with me, I know she will be up to something later in future. Even teachers started to love her. More than we do. She was made a prefect and also the class captain in less than some months. Though Barbara is very brilliant and good at what she does. Barbara was also a girl who came from a rich family that were very well known and well-to-do, and guess what? Just to my surprise, some of my teammates left my team and started moving to her team. One by one, for the reason I don't know. And at the end of the day, I was only left with 3 of my girlfriends and Mason. Mason. Mason is a good-looking boy, blonde, and he was a type of boy that every girl would like to have because he got everything he wanted in a guy. Mason is honest, kind, cute, brilliant, caring, trustworthy, attractive, and fun to be with, and a lot more of criteria embedded in him. To be honest, I like him a lot, and I'm tripping for him, but I don't want to be forward as a lady because I think he loves me as well. Well, I'll tell you about our love story later. One faithful day, while I was in class, I noticed that Mason was missing in class. I was still trying to look around for him in class, but then I heard some voices calling my name. Susan! Susan! I tried tracing the voice outside the class. I rushed to see what's going on, and what I saw was Barbara talking to Mason in a private area. I was so pissed and jealous at first, but I never knew what they were talking about. So I decided to stay calm. But in all my mind, I knew Barbara was up to something. After class, I ran to meet Mason, to stylishly ask what they were both discussing. But to my surprise, Mason was just beating around the bush. Same thing happened the following day, but this time, when they saw me, they got detached immediately. I asked Mason again, "What's going on?" He said nothing. She just asked me to help her out in something. So I told him that he's trying to leave my team as well, or what. But then he shouted at me and left. Then I knew something had gone wrong. Days went by, and obviously Mason has changed toward me entirely, so one day I decided to secretly sneak on Mason's phone to check his messages and chat. And then I saw what marveled me. A lot. I saw he texted Barbara, and Barbara sent him some hearts and love texts to him. And from there, I understood that they are loving each other, which means that Barbara has achieved part of her plans. But I will make sure that her plan will not be achieved completely. So I decided that one day I'm going to approach Barbara to talk some shit to her head. So that day after school hour, I went straight to Barbara to confront her. But then immediately, I got to where she was staying. All what I planned to say wiped off my head, so I went blank. But then I told her to leave Mason alone, and I went further, saying to her that Mason is my boyfriend, that she should let him be, otherwise you're going to have a problem with me. She was shocked seeing me in that manner because I have never for once behaved in such a manner ever since I got to that college. The following day, after we left the assembly ground, Mason came towards my direction to approach me and shouted at me that what effrontery do I have to speak to Barbara in such manner? He so much raised his voice at me that few numbers of people looked toward our direction, and I was seriously embarrassed. Throughout my stay in school that day, I was not myself. I did not talk to anyone. I kept to myself, and after the school hour, I went home quietly, without saying a word to anybody. When I got home, I found my parents having issues again and fighting. I never knew when I busted into tears in their presence immediately. My parents stopped the fight and faced my direction. I just went quietly to my room and locked the door. I was so depressed that I was lost in thought all day that I slept off without eating. The issues between my parents and the one going on in my life is so frustrating. Now I've decided to stand on my feet, never to let my family issues or my personal life issues bring me down. Now Barbara has taken all my teammates, and now she is also taking my lovely Mason. I will never let that happen, and it will not happen. So I decided to take some naughty move, but I later ended up messing myself up with it. One day I texted Mason, "Sweetheart, can you please come over to my place so that we can practice our homework together?" But I was surprised with the reply I got back from him. But then I'm sure it was Barbara that took his phone to reply back to me. So Barbara took Mason his phone and replied to me saying, "I'm not your sweetheart. Please don't write to me again. I hate you." immediately after the reply, she took a screenshot of the message I sent to Mason and spread it all the class the following day. When I got to school the following day, I discovered that people were just laughing at me, and then I later noticed that it was because of the message I sent to Mason. So immediately, I went straight to meet Mason and asked him about the message, and he told me that his phone was with Barbara when I sent the message yesterday. So she was the one that spread the screenshot. I was so ashamed of myself for some moment, but then I never let that discourage me at all, because I already got my mind made up. But then I thought of it. Why don't I just go and meet Barbara face to face, and then we can talk it out with our actions? So I decided to go meet her. So this is it. I couldn't stand it anymore. So I just have to tell Barbara that I have a beef. I want to fight. I will wait for you after class. She was surprised hearing me say that, but I just have to take the move. Class is over. Immediately after the class, I went out so fast so as to go and wait for her. I was waiting for her outside. It took her up to an hour before she showed up. I already thought she would not be coming, but then I saw her arriving with all her teammates. I was looking into her eyes until she came close enough, and I pushed her with all my force I got, and she fell backwards and hit her head on the concrete. At first, I was happy that she fell on the ground, but then everyone screamed and ran away because Barbara refused to get up from the floor. Barbara was not coming onto her feet. I was very scared and feeling feverish immediately. I screamed her name, but she refused to stand up. She remained on the ground. Then I saw some teacher coming our way, so I ran away. I rushed home with fear all over me. My brothers asked me what was wrong. All I could say was to lie to them, saying it was a teacher that flogged me in school because I did not do well in my classwork. When my mom noticed I didn't come out for dinner, she came into my room to check on me and asked me what was wrong. I told her nothing happened, but tears were all over my face. I was unable to hold back the tears. She was all around me that night, but I did not say a word to her. She persuaded me to talk, but those words are too heavy for me to say. She left my room without hearing a word from me, but within me, I'm sure she will still know about it. I couldn't sleep all night. I was trying to imagine what could have happened. At a point, I was blaming myself. Why did I make the move of telling her to come and meet outside? Why did I push her? Why did I confront her? Why didn't I just let everything go? Series of questions were just running through my mind all the night. I was unable to close my eyes for just 1 second. Such a thing has never happened to me before. I could not open up for my parents because I never knew what they would say to me or do if I should explain the situation to them. The next day, I didn't go to school. I received a call from Mason, but I did not pick his call up. I was panicked and scared. Then in the afternoon, a teacher called my parents and explained everything that happened to them. They also notified my parents the update about Barbara's condition, that Barbara is in the hospital. She'd been admitted and in a state of coma. Immediately, my parents came to my room. They met me crying, but as a parent, even though they were not happy with the situation, they just have to console me at the moment. So we left for the school immediately. On getting to the principal's office, I was questioned for doing such an act, and a lot more was said to me. I was suspended from coming to school. Now I'm living a life of regret. I was unable to see Mason again, my teammates, my friends, and a lot more. Days after days, since I was not allowed to come to school again, I was in my room doing nothing but praying to God to heal Barbara, because I know a lot of things that is attached to it if she passes away. So one faithful day, after a week, we got the news that Barbara passed away. Oh my God! How come? How did it happen? Did God refuse to answer my prayers? Many of questions were just running through my head. I was weeping and rolling on the floor. Everyone was shocked, but I was even frightened and afraid the more. According to the doctor's report, Barbara had a large tumor on her head, but also said that she had an internal bleeding, which was too much, that she lost a lot of blood. My life ended there, because immediately she landed at the hospital, her parents already filed a case at the station. Now that her death has been announced, I have no other choice than to face the wrath of government. So I was arrested and sent to court. I was sent to juvenile detention for 4 years. Now I ruined my life with anger. I ruined my life with jealousy. Going to school has been stopped. I put my parents in shame. Now Mason has forgotten about the person called Susan. My plan and what I wish to become has been crumbled with my own hand. If and only if I could take back the hand of time, then I would not have allowed this to happen. If and only if this cup can pass over me, then I will be forever grateful. But all this are only mere thoughts which can never come to pass. I spent all the 4 years in regrets and lived alone, and with 100 times of more problems than what I have experienced in school. It was indeed a hell. I never wish anyone to go there, not even my enemies. I cried every day and spent many nights thinking about what I did to Barbara. In my head sometimes came a reason telling me to stop, because Barbara left, but not for my fault. But then, again, deep in me, I knew that I was the person who is guilty of all this. I found 1,000 ways I should react to that situation to stop this from happening. And I still, in my mind, got Barbara, and still think about what I should have done instead. The situation was so serious that I feel guilty, and I can't pass a day without thinking about her. I ruined it all. Now the day has come. 4 years has come and gone. I never knew it's already 4 years because I lost count already. On that faithful day, an officer came toward me and told me to come out, that it's time for me to be released. I was so happy again, knowing fully well that I'm going to see my family again. When I got to the officer's office, I saw my younger ones with joy in my heart. I gave them a huge and long hug. So the officer told me they were the ones that sent for my family, since it's already time for me to be released. My siblings are now grown up, but not looking well kept. When I noticed that I did not see our parents, I asked them what was about our parents. But they told me that when we get home, everything will be explained. Well, I didn't get to worry myself about that because I was so happy and joyous. Finally, I got home and everywhere is now changed. The surroundings and the whole environment is changed completely. I shouted, "Mom! Mom! Mom!" But to my surprise, I received answer from no one. I called my dad, also no reply as well. Then I asked my younger ones, where are they? Then they broke the news, saying they are both dead. I shouted, "How? What happened? Who killed them?" All these questions were asked with tears on my face. I was told Mummy died after some month. I went to jail because of the thought of seeing her own first child being sentenced to prison. And also, Dad died some years after Mom passed away. He had turned into a drunkard, and he drank all day and night, regretting all his actions over Mum and not taking proper care of us. They also told me that they've been surviving from helping people with their house chores and lots more of petty work so that they can feed and go to school daily. I busted into tears so loud that my younger ones just had to leave me to cry it out. Day after day, I need to get out of the thought of what life has given to me and move on with what I have for myself. My schooling career has been hindered because I need to put some food on the table for my younger ones. So I went searching for a job as a salesperson in a nearby supermarket, which I was actually accepted, and I was getting paid by the end of the month, and I was using that to take care of my siblings. I was able to send my junior ones to school, even if it was not up to a normal standard school, but at least I was trying my best to be a father and mother to them. Also, my boss at work has been so supportive financially and in a word of encouragement because I told her about my story, and she was really touched when she heard about it. After some years, I was in the supermarket performing my normal daily activities, and all of a sudden, a Prince Charming young cute guy walked in, making an inquiry on what he wants to get from the other staff, but I was attending to other customers. Immediately, I heard the guy's voice. It is so much sounds familiar. I looked up to see who was talking, and guess what? It was Mason! I screamed at the top of my voice, "Mason!" He was so shocked to see me, and he was so very happy as well. He asked what I was doing here, and I told him. I'm one of their staff, and guess what? Mason is now a top medical doctor in a well-known hospital in the country. He collected my contact that day and fixed a date for us to see and talk. Well, so fast I and Mason get along with each other. After I narrated all that happened to him, right from the time I was sentenced to prison till date, Mason and I became best of friends, and now he explained to me what him and Barbara were discussing those days in the college. He told me that Barbara and him were planning on how Group 1, which was my team, will win the competition. And as for my teammates leaving my group, he said it was all a planned work. He told me that the screenshot she sent round the school was just to divert my attention, so I would feel jealous. Now I was so ashamed of myself, and I prayed to God for forgiveness. After all that, luckily for me, Mason and I continue our love story from where we had stopped it in college days. Now I got to remember Barbara the more every blessed day. Not up to a year, Mason proposed to me, and guess what? I said yes. Now I am married and have a daughter which I named Barbara. I want it to be that every time I call her to remind me what I did. Though Mason was not in support of me naming our daughter Barbara, but I had to plead with him to please allow me. I want to pay the sentence, and yes, I am paying it every day. I cry every day and pray for her. God bless Barbara.
Do you sometimes wish you could forget some days? Skip them or just play rewind on the awful clips of your life? The pain and the stress sometimes make you unfocused. Your vision goes blurred and mind all hazy. Well, it was exactly one of those days. But first, I'll give you a little background about me. I'm Natalie. I am 14 years old. I have recently started going out with a boy from my school, Harry. He's a dream come true. He has asked me to be his girlfriend a few weeks ago. My mom passed away when I was 6, and I was brought up by my dad, who is extremely hardworking. My dad is a mechanic and leaves home at the crack of dawn. It was a Thursday morning. My dad had already left for work. I was in deep slumber when a shooting pain in my stomach jolted through my entire body. It was hard for me to breathe. It took everything in my body to get up from my bed. My dog was watching me with the bleary eyes, and I wondered, why can't he do something? Can't he see my agony? After the struggle, I finally grabbed hold of my phone and called 911. The dispatcher was kind and understanding. She was quick to send me help. Finally, they arrived. The sound of the ambulance alerted my dog. My dog bolted towards the door and started barking continuously. As a result, they broke the main door and took me to the hospital. I opened my eyes to a scrupulously spotless hospital room. Beams of sunlight filtered through the window. "Relax, honey," I heard a soft voice whisper. It was a nurse. I sighed and tried to relax. Within the fraction of a few seconds, I glanced at my stomach, which made me panic. It was swollen to the size of a hot air balloon. I started questioning myself. "What is this?" I asked myself repeatedly. It took me a fine moment before it dawned upon me. I let out a huge gasp. Am I a 14-year-old growing a real-life baby in my tummy? Am I going to become a mother? I cringed at the thought, but the sight of my growing stomach only confirmed my realization. "But I've only had my first kiss with Harry a few days ago," I said as I tried to gather my thoughts. "This can't be true." I started crying relentlessly. My shrieks and cries grasped the attention of the nurses. They looked at me and started laughing. Their laughter overshadowed my agony. Their shrill laugh made my head spin, which came to a halt when I heard a sudden knock at the door. A feeling of relief washed over me as the person behind the door was my affectionate father. "Dad, I've missed you," I breathed. My dad had a shabby appearance. His eyes were sunken in with huge eye bags underneath. I was slightly confused. He rushed towards me and engulfed me in a hug. He ignored my growing belly, but when he saw, he gave me a smile. "I can't believe I'm going to be a grandfather." I was taken back. Why is he behaving like that? I pondered. That was certainly not the reaction I was expecting. "We have to get you out of this hell," said my dad. "Why?" I questioned. "They are not good for you." It would be an understatement if I say I was bewildered at how my dad was behaving. The nurses started laughing out of the blue. Laughter echoed through the white walls of the hospital room. It made my dad lose his temper. He started yelling at them. Suddenly, made his way towards me and picked me. He detached the tube of the drip out of my arm. I gasped due to the sudden discomfort. His actions alerted the hospital staff. The nurses called the security and they took my dad away. They prevented him from seeing me afterward. In the next few minutes, the same intensity of pain ran through my frail body. The nurses injected medicine into my body and asked me to relax. "You'll be all right, darling," comforted a nurse. I threw up multiple times that night, which consequently made me feel better. They gave me a few pills to make me fall asleep. Later that night, I woke up due to a disturbance in my room. I was shocked to see my dad in my room. He had his hand over my attendant's mouth. I was petrified. I had never seen that mysterious terror in my dad's eyes. He was unrecognizable in nurse scrubs. Anyone could be easily fooled by his new persona. I didn't know what to do. But I knew one thing. My life was in danger. He hurriedly put me in the wheelchair, ripping away the drips. "Dad, stop! Dad, you are hurting me!" I let out a faint, incoherent cry. "Shut up!" Dad yelled. His eyes were bloodshot red, skin pale and lips trembling. I closed my eyes momentarily and a whimper escaped my mouth. What has come over my dad? I wished my mom was still alive. Is it too much to ask for? I thought medicine and illness made me emotional. I hated that feeling. My dad took a hold of my wheelchair and rushed through the bleak hospital hallway. He greeted the doctors and hospital staff in a sing-song female voice. I never knew my dad had astounding acting skills, but similarly, I didn't know anything about him, did I? I questioned myself. I never knew I had to see the day I'd have to see his facade slipping away. But here I was, being escorted by my dad dressed in nurse clothes. Life is so strange. It was too much to process for my 14-year-old brain. A doctor stopped us at one point and requested my dad to join him for his daily round at the children's ward. My dad pushed my wheelchair in a vacant hospital room and left me to help the doctors. I was surprised. He left me there for some time and came back with a devilish grin plastered on his face. "They are such fools, the doctors," I can outsmart them every single day. I couldn't believe my dad would say such things for people highly regarded in our society. He was being outrageously awful. He told me that he has checked the patient's body temperature, measured blood pressure, and blood glucose concentrations. That easy, you see. They think they're gods. I had been horrified for my life as well as the ones my dad treated a while ago. Few seconds passed, and I heard some voices. "Catch them! Catch them! They are running! Phone the security now!" The entire hospital was in mayhem. People were running. Nurses, visitors, doctors, and admin staff, all of them were in a state of chaos. But nothing could stop my dad. He was still going peacefully at his own pace, oblivious to the chaos caused by his antics. A yell stopped him for a moment, but he grabbed the wheelchair and started sprinting through the hospital towards the elevator, colliding with the medical equipment and food trolleys in our way. At one point, he toppled cleaning trolley. There was alcohol and disinfectant all over the floor. God help me, save me from the monster my dad has become. Nurses were calling the security, and I wondered why it took them so long. "Please don't harm me," I cried. My mind was spinning and my vision was becoming hazy, but I tried my best to keep myself conscious. I took small breaths as instructed by my father once. I wanted my father back. "Where did you go, Dad? Please, what has happened to you?" He blatantly ignored my cries. Finally, we reached the elevator. My heart was pounding hard against my chest. I had streams of tears running down my cheeks. My life was at risk because of my father. Is there anyone more unlucky than me? I questioned myself. I hope not. My dad pushed the buttons to the highest floor. "We'll put you to sleep forever. These doctors are no good for your deteriorating health," he whispered in my ear. For the first time in my life, hearing my dad's voice caused shivers to run through my body. I always found his voice soothing and comforting. I was certain he was possessed or something. He was behaving like a hysterical madman. Not only that, but he also didn't care about his blood, me. We reached the 40th floor. I was frightened. The doors of the elevator opened. Luckily, the security guards reached before us. His face lost its color, his eyes were wide and his body shaking. He was panic-stricken. In a matter of seconds, he pushed me towards the security guys. I was grateful they arrived on time. I didn't even want to think about what could have happened if they didn't come to rescue me. My dad went hysterical. He was mocking them. He was making animal-like noises. "Catch me if you can." He looked like a kid has taken away his favorite stuffed toy or candy. "Let's have kids." "Kids?" I questioned. He sure had some mental issues. What could have happened in a span of night? I didn't know. He ran towards the stairs with guards following behind him. I was left all alone on God knows what floor. I screamed and cried for help. I tried to gather strength to get up on my legs. My legs were shaking. I was having hot flashes and I was sweating profusely. I said my prayers repeatedly. "God, give me the strength to stand up. Put me to my feet." It took everything in me to get up. I gripped the sides of the wheelchair tightly, trying to stand up. Finally, I got up. I couldn't believe myself. I let out a scream. I yelled, "Hurrah! I can walk!" With that, I went inside the elevator. Despite Dad's questionable antics, I still loved him. Why wouldn't I? He had brought me up with all the love and affection in this world. I was the luckiest kid with the most affectionate and caring father and an adorable little pup. Oh, my pup, you must be hungry. The thought of my puppy all alone in my house saddened me. I stopped at each floor to help my dad, but couldn't see him anywhere. I screamed his name each time, but my efforts proved to be useless. At the 7th floor, I finally saw him. But what I saw made my head spin. I couldn't believe I saw that with my own eyes. My jaw went slack. I thought I was daydreaming, so I pinched myself again and again. It was my dad getting into a fight with someone who was also my dad. I was shocked. My dad was wearing his work clothes. They were greasy. Couldn't contain my emotions and thoughts. It was the moment I passed out. When I woke up and saw my loving dad next to me, feeling of relief washed over me. My dad gave me a warm embrace. I couldn't stop crying. I was so scared. Do you know what has happened? Please, Dad, I need to know. He told me to relax. He told me that guy was a criminal who had run away from jail. He was taking revenge on the hospital. The hospital had sent him to jail because he took part in criminal activities taken place at the hospital a few years ago. He resembled my dad, which is why I mistook him as my dad. In addition to this, I ate too much Chipotle, which caused food poisoning. I needed emergency treatment, which I received promptly. My dad brought me my favorite tomato cream soup and kissed my forehead. You're safe, my kid.
Hi, I'm Lisa. Life is indeed like an onion you peel one layer after the other, and sometimes it makes you cry. That's what happened to me when I was 13. My whole life came to a standstill when I was viciously knocked down by uncertainties of life. Imagine yourself not being able to move your body. You can hear and see everything happening around you, but you can't communicate. People come around you, but you can't talk to them. They can't even hug you. You try to give your body orders to blink, shake, laugh, and even cry, but it doesn't obey you. Imagine yourself not being able to say, I'm hungry, I'm pressed, I'm hurt, I'm cold. I lay lifeless for days, weeks, months, and years, disconnected from the physical world. You might be asking how this happened. Well, that was when I fell off the staircase. I and my twin brother Peter are the only children of my parents. We are of the middle class, and Dad makes sure we are comfortable with his meager paycheck. Dad said it took them 30 years before giving birth to us because Mom had no fallopian tubes, so all hope of Mom getting pregnant in life was lost, and they had to live with it. One day, 3 men visited them. They were hungry and haggard-looking. Then Mom asked them to come in, but they wouldn't. They sat outside. Mom went into the house, made them a nice meal, and they ate their fill. Then Dad asked them to come in the second time. They did, and left after a while. After 7 days, Mom became pregnant and finally gave birth to me and my twin brother, Peter. Dad said our birth changed a lot of things. It seems as if there was this separation between him and Mom. They no longer do things together as husband and wife. Mom no longer contributes to running of the family. All she cares about was her Peter, day in and day out. But Dad was not like her. He gave us equal love and support, irrespective of our differences. I so much love the only sibling I have in this world. But the love was not returned. All I kept getting from him was a stab, rejection, and gossiping me to Mom. We are not identical twins. We had a lot of character differences likewise in our lifestyle. I love nature and adventure, but my twin does not care for such. He can stay in front of the television all day. Peter is a sadist, but I'm not. Maybe that's why Dad loved being around me, while Mom preferred Peter. Maybe because he looked so much like her. Mom is one of the horrible persons I've ever met in my life. You neither know when she is happy or unhappy. She is always moody. The only thing that makes her happy is whenever she sees Peter. To my mom, I did not exist. But there were things that makes me happy. The presence of my dad in my life was the major thing. I love adventures, and so Dad decided to build an adventure room for me and Peter in the underground of our little home. But Peter was not interested. Even when I was cleaning the room, Peter walked in and laughed mockingly. That was ridiculous. I assisted Dad to decorate the room with different kinds of paintings and a lot of scientific pictures. So the adventure room became another room for me. Another thing that made me happy was the surprise gift Dad got for me on my 13th birthday. That's Rosie, my cat. She is not just a cat, but a companion, a friend, and maybe another twin. I was so happy, I couldn't thank Dad enough. From that day on, I had a companion in Dad's absence. Rosie seems to understand me more than anyone else in the house, including Dad. Whenever Mom and Peter puts on a horror movie and starts making all sorts of noise in the sitting room, I go to the adventure room with Rosie. I can hear him talk to me with his mews, as if he is saying, "Don't worry, I am here. Everything will be all right." On one of such days, I couldn't control myself and I yelled at my twin brother, "Why can't you stop all these noises?" I decided to go to my adventure room. I left with Rosie following me behind the staircase. But I never knew Peter was also running after me. Then Rosie came in front of me, winking her eyes left and right, as if she was telling me something. But I couldn't give her attention because I was walking very fast in anger. Perhaps she was trying to tell me that Peter was behind me. Suddenly, I felt a push and slipped off the staircase. Everywhere became dark. I could see Rosie running around me, not knowing what to do, but I couldn't talk to her. My mom and Peter locked up themselves in their room, abandoned me on the floor. But Rosie lay beside me crying until Dad came home around 11 p.m. He immediately rushed me to the hospital. After a little while, I felt awake. I tried to make a move, but there was no response. Then it dawned on me that I am no longer myself. Oh, how did this happen to me? Am I dead or what? I could feel my body shivering. Suddenly, I heard someone. Wow, if I was able to hear someone, that means I wasn't dead after all. Yes, I heard him, but I couldn't see him. The way he talked made me understand that he's a doctor. He was explaining something to my parents. He told them that I had excess internal bleeding, which was as a result of delay of rushing me to the hospital immediately the accident happened. He said that I will be in this state until God knows when. Oh, I tried to open my eyes, to tell them that I can hear them, but my eyes couldn't move, neither could my mouth. I was devastated that I couldn't do anything. I automatically became a vegetable. How wicked life could be. Just 13 years ago, I had been a free girl who loves her dad, her cat, her career, and as well loves to play. I was happy and lively, but now everything suddenly changed. Doctors were confused. They thought I was completely in a coma. All I could hear was Dad telling me all will be well. As for my twin brother, I never set my eyes on him. Sometimes I wonder if he is really my blood. My mom completely disappeared. The doctor finally announced to Dad that there is nothing to be done. So Dad told him that I am coming home. I was excited to be home, but I felt bad again when Mom warned Dad not to bring me home because I'm going to be a burden to her. But I guess Dad's reason for bringing me home was to make sure I was around things that I love. Back home, I was treated as non-existing being. But right inside me, I kept telling myself that I am alive. Friends stopped visiting me. Dad's pursuit ran dry because the life support machine that kept me breathing was very expensive. Before now, I could run away from Mom and Peter's noise, but now I can't avoid it. Dad couldn't help it anymore. Rosie was the only one that understands me. She is indeed an extraordinary cat. She feels my pains whenever Mom yells. She will come close to me, touching my hands with her mouth, as if to say, "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Before, Dad used to come in to see me 3 times a day and then recharge the life support machine that kept me breathing. Surprisingly, one day, Dad tried removing the socket of the machine. Then Rosie cried out loud. This touched Dad, and he left in tears. Rosie always tiptoed into the room at any time of the day looking at me, and I know she is whispering something to me. Months passed by, and it was already 1, 2, 3 years. Dad got tired of me, and Mom complained I was occupying space, so I should be moved to a smaller room. And they transferred me to this small room where nobody was visiting apart from Rosie. This was the only time I saw Peter creep into the room. He looked at me and sighed and banged the door. It was not long I started hearing Christmas songs that told me it was Christmas again. I couldn't even celebrate. But in my subconscious mind, I was thanking God for another new year. And I was 17 this time because I was able to guess every period of the yearly celebration. Mom celebrated with her friends, making noise and smoking. Their noise became more unbearable for me. So Dad moved me to a clinic where nurses can take care of me. I saw Dad talking to the nurses. Who knows what Dad is telling them, I thought. I felt he was telling them to allow him to bring Rosie to stay with me. I felt a little relief as I saw Dad carry Rosie to sit beside me. At this time, I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember my crave for sciences, nor the moments I played with friends or the adventure room. But one picture kept appearing to me is Rosie's picture. She is my best friend. She is always close by me. So I decided to create my own world in my subconscious state. In this world, Rosie was my companion. We did a lot of things together. We went to school, shopping, restaurants, and played together. There were also these other 2 persons that joined our world. Perhaps they could be some victim of people in the coma state. Another 6 years went by, and I remembered not seeing Dad for a whole year. Well, I never cared about the physical world anymore because I was enjoying the new world I created. But one day Dad came by. I saw him weeping with my best flower, a rose flower, in his hands. He also bought me a science kit and some other things which he decorated my bed with. Then I could hear him say, "Happy 20th birthday, my angel." Dad left the room angrily. Then Rosie picked one of those rose flowers Dad had kept and brought it close to my nose. My goodness! I perceived it and smiled at her. She screamed in excitement. She kept screaming. That her scream attracted the doctors and nurses. By the time they arrived, my eyes were open. The resident doctor was surprised. He said he has never recorded any case as this since his 30 years of practice in the medical field. Gradually, I began to regain consciousness. I was not angry when the doctors told me that I cannot move my legs anymore because my spinal cord was affected badly. Although it took me time before I accepted to be confined to the wheelchair. After all, God gave me life, so I am grateful to Him. Before I was discharged from the hospital, my mom came, begging that I forgive her attitude towards me, just that she never liked to have a baby girl. But now she has realized her mistakes. Peter was crying and feels guilty for pushing me down. He confessed that he was acting out of the influence of Mom. Who am I not to forgive them? What if I died? I wonder if I will be here. God forgave me and gave me a new life, so I forgave them. and I was glad to reunite with my family again.
Crossroads. I always remember how our walking you home started. It was on the evening after a final term exam we gave together, and I did not want to let you go home alone, as you always do. Surprisingly, you let me. Unlike the other days when I'd keep on pestering you two. It had opened up the pathway to a regular happening in our lives, where I'd take you home every day or even accompany you from your home. Even though it has been many months since we last got to walk together again. But just for the sake of today, I wanted to experience it again, to walk on that path again. The last few times, it used to start from the plinth of the Fine Arts Building, where you and I would sit for hours and talk under the eerie evening light or the golden afternoon. Then you would get up, say your mother is going to kill you if you delay any longer, and from the path behind the building, our journey would start. The sodium golden lights on the road would always light up as soon as we would start, as if a cluster of fireflies to lead us through our regular path into the night. On our way, there would be so many crosswalks to go through, even a busy crossroad just before your house. You never could cross roads properly, and it would always be my responsibility to lead you safely to the other side. Sometimes you would hold my hand or my shirt's cuff while crossing if you felt too afraid or overwhelmed by the traffic. I would always pull you through no matter what. Then, we would go on walking, and our shadows would get closer than our bodies. Maybe I will try to slide my hand into yours as well, wouldn't I? It is raining right now, and I do not have an umbrella. The raindrops fall on my head and slide through my scalp, mixing with sweat on my forehead, but I don't mind as I walk. Even if I had an umbrella, I would always give it to you, because it is embarrassing to walk under the same umbrella. Even after 2 years of being together, it was always so awkward and embarrassing. But right now, my scarred feet hurt like hell. No, I still want to walk with you. So I do, and so I will. Why not? After all, I walked with you for almost 7 kilometers, didn't I? When did feet ache ever matter? You would vent at me for walking with my shoes rubbing the ground. But right now, I do not really know where you are. You might be on a car going to or from home, or you might be somewhere else, to find somebody else. Oh hey, that girl looks like you. Hey, it could be you. Oh, no, it isn't. Would you call me if you saw me? Would you even recognize me after so many months? Please tell me your memories of me have not faded yet. Oh well, it does not matter. I will just pretend that you are walking beside me. That is better, isn't it? Getting drenched with me, passing that familiar burger stand, right after that tall building that we always make fun of. You're so quiet, so maybe I'll just sing La Vie en Rose to you. It will help, won't it? Remember, I did sing that on the night when I first realized whatever I did or tried to do was not really enough, didn't I? Even though we were both broken, I had to let you know somehow that it will be all right, didn't I? Oh no, it's already the dark intersection. I stopped my pace. I don't want you to go right now. Why not just a few more minutes? What will happen if you go home just a bit late? You're going to be gone forever, so just take the time before you do. If I could be reborn and reborn, I would live this moment again and again and walk on. But I can't, can I? So? But no, you insist, you have to go. You convince me you have to leave, and it's already been too late. It is already far beyond what you could stay for. But I do not want to let go of your hands. I do not want to leave you out of my sight. But well, finally, I have to accept it. We start walking again, slower than before, and I can make best use of the time by trying to embarrass you as much as I can, saying cliche, cringe romantic things, or trying to read your mind to guess what you're thinking right now. You don't say anything, again, and I realize I cannot really seem to read you anymore. Before I can say anything again, the crossroads come like a car running the red. When we cross the crosswalk, you go straight forward, where your house is, and I go left, onto my bus stop. But there are so many cars and buses and trucks on the busy crosswalk today, much more than any other time, and crossing it is so difficult. I can't get over to the other side so easily, so I try to hold on to your hand. I look at you to tell you that I love you for the last time, because I won't be able to say it again when you go home. But where are you? I search for you here and there, but you've already crossed the road. Thinking back my past 20 years, I just want to write them down. My name is Claire, from C. I would like to be clear, but English is not my mother tongue. I'm 20 years old. February 14th is my birthday. I was born in a little city. It's sort of next to the country's north boundary. I have an older sister and a little sister. Yes, my family only has one male, who is my father. I'll start from as much earlier as I can remember, as possible. Most things only have some pieces left in my mind. As time goes on, it will have more detail. The earliest thing I can remember is when I was 4 years old. My parents both were people who sold wholesale vegetables. As my thought, they were really busy at the time. Every day they woke up very early and brought me to the stall. Small, crowded place. They worked very hard. They were young and energetic. In other words, they were consuming themselves. One thing I remember is that I was hanging out with my friend, passed by a supermarket, and we walked in and grabbed a pack of milk and just drank it. I was too small to know I have to pay. Staff there wouldn't let us go till our parents found us in a hurry after 2 hours, perhaps. This is fresh in my mind because they were so angry and worried about us, while I have absolutely no idea what happened. We were poor, like really very poor. Can't even afford extra clothes or a good meal. By the way, when I was 4, my older sister is a blur in my mind, and my little sister wasn't even born yet. So when I was old enough, I started to go against her. I wasn't doing what she asked, no matter what, so it was kind of extreme. Whenever I didn't want to do what she asked of me, she always made me feel guilty. So I just ignored. I said my family, just normal, and my parents are working very hard, so I'll do some tiny things to let them feel at least relax. 'Cause we can do nothing about their work. For example, when I didn't want to mop the floor, she would say, "They're so tired from working outside. They come back and they see their house so dirty." And I'll feel like it's my fault. I don't talk to my big sister much for a long time. She always has a way to get me pissed off. Maybe I'm too judgmental towards her, but sometimes what she said is really annoying. And I don't like arguing, so I won't talk to her unless I have to. But she's a talker. Her words are plentiful sometimes. I do feel lonely, and I want to go to crowded places, 'cause I want to meet new people and new stuff. An understanding or comfort of what I'm looking for. I'm not a good talker. Don't have any move, just as things go on. I'm eager to be understood, and have someone who can really be with me when I get upset, but I can't find that. I can't be with or close with the same person for too long. At the start, I would have tried my best for that person, but I can't be straightforward with my thoughts. On the contrary, I always want people to care about me, my tiny world, or implied meaning. You can guess. That's basically impossible. So I wouldn't try to explain or discuss anything, but my self-defense starts to build. I like new things, 'cause new people means new me, new experience. I don't like to talk about myself or even don't like to argue or anything. So even sometimes I meet something unfair, I would self-digest, but it's just getting bigger now. I can't digest it myself. There will have to be something I can figure out. So at the moment, maybe I'll leave it. But next time when something happens, I have to self-digest, the past wouldn't come through again. I have strong self-defense. Like if one day I feel you're not really wanting to understand me, I wouldn't ask anything. But the wall between us is building. I would fade. I remember I had a really good friend when I was in primary school. Like we talked about everything and we were always together. But I don't know, I just got tired in the end and tried to keep pushing her away, get her away. She didn't do anything wrong, I just felt suffocated. But people come and go, right? I'm a totally contradicting person. I can't stand people so close to me, but can't even understand me. I was longing to go somewhere very far on my own, like what I said before, meet new people, new experience. So I started to collect relative information about it. But I can't just travel. So I found a volunteer thing. You can get a certificate, which can be very helpful for a job in the future. It also has to be inexpensive. So I chose India. I stayed there for 6 weeks. They covered accommodation and food. All I needed to pay was project fee and a plane ticket. About the project I chose, I didn't think too much. They all have a very similar introduction, so I chose randomly. It's about teaching kids English. To be honest, I prefer to be with kids or pets than older adults. So I made an interview, and I went there. In my case, that would be totally alone space. Probably add a dog, and in a beautiful countryside that would inspire me. You may notice that surroundings will influence me a lot. But every time when I want to face them, I would get so nervous. Sometime I was thinking maybe I'm a control freak. 'Cause if things out of expectation, I would be like, don't know what to do. I don't even know if I'm really in love with traveling and meeting new things. Maybe that's just an excuse to escape. I'm always chasing something. Currently, I'm not. And put my expectations on that, but the truth is, even though I get eventually sick of things, it won't change too much. I don't know what is wrong with me. You know, I always feel better in places not so familiar to me. That's why I only send letters to foreigners and only join foreign communities. Different languages and culture will minimize my sensitivity. And I would rather travel alone. I may never travel with others. Even travel, I prefer to go to other countries far from mine. The really strange loss prevention guy. I'm bored. Thought I'd tell my story about a creep I had to work with when I was a teenager. I won't give a name to the store, but I'm sure you will figure that out easy. It's a lower-end Walmart that usually hosts a lower-end pizza chain inside. Well, I worked in the pizza part at 18 years old. It was probably my 3rd week at the job when the loss prevention guy Chad comes over and orders a pizza. I'm ringing him up when he stares at me for a while and he says, "Are you the new girl?" I smile and nod. He tells me I should follow him to his office. I kind of look back at my manager confused and my manager tells me it's okay, he will cover my spot. So I followed Chad to the back of the store. On the way there, he is pointing out all cameras in the store, like on the ceiling, and explaining to me how those are just the ones you see. There are the ones in places you would never expect you are being watched. I just nod and say, yeah, cool, wow, because I could have cared less and thought there was not too much purpose for me to go in this little tour or know these things. We make it back to his office, and it's tiny. Just a wall half filled, with monitors and a couple computers, a large desk, and his chair. He closed the door, skirted past me, and sat on his chair, and I stood by the door because there was nowhere else to go. He starts talking about his job and what he's supposed to do there, and how that included even watching the pizza employees, because the employees are known for stealing slices of pizza without paying. He tells me a story about how just a few weeks before I was hired, they fired 3 guys at the same time on the spot, because the day before they ate the extra breadsticks on their lunch and didn't pay for it. He gets really stern for a second and asks me seriously, "Have you ever stolen anything before?" I start to get really serious, back in a particularly snarky and sarcastic way. "Oh, no, never, Chad. I have never and I will never steal anything." I was actually a career criminal at this point in my life. The only reason why I was working that job is because I moved across the country for a fresh start, because a few years before I was a druggie and funded my habits through a great deal of theft. Eventually, I was slapped with an assault with a deadly weapon, but I got those charges cleared, and everything eventually went off my record. I knew there was no way he would know any of this. My record was squeaky clean at this point. He just laughs and says, "Yeah, right, I don't believe that. I just played along. I'm a really good person. I would never ever do something like that. It's yucky." He just stares at me and says, "I think you're hiding something." I'm like, "Okay," and stay quiet. He says, "You moved here to this small town from a big city. And when I asked around about you, turns out you moved here without any family either. For a young girl like you, that's really suspicious. I think you're running from something." I just shrug and say I'm independent. However, starting to get really annoyed that I'm being grilled for no reason by a rent-a-cop. He says he wants to show me some things. He turns around and starts explaining some of the tech behind the security cameras, showing me some real-time video of the store. He points out these 2 girls walking around, and he goes on to explain on how he can zoom in and be able to read what is on their phones. And he then chuckles and says, "Say hi to your boyfriend from me," which I can only imagine meant he was reading my phone screen when I was on my break. He starts to say how he has been watching me for the security camera, as he does with all new employees, and says I have strange habits. I just stay quiet. He pulls up past footage, like remembers the date off the top of his head, and it's me walking into the bathroom. I'm like pretty creeped out at this point, but I stay quiet. He says, "This is the only time I have seen you go to the bathroom since you have worked here. And you work late and overtime. Don't you have to go more often?" I just say, "Bladder of steel." He goes, "Uh-huh," like he doesn't believe me. He then pulls up footage of me talking to some guy on my break, and I say snarky, "Oh, look, there's my boyfriend you want me to say hi to." He then pulls up some things on his computer, and he explains how all the employees are given a number that they can use in the store at checkout for an employee discount. I already knew this because I was given my number and have just been using it frequently. He explains to me how he can even track employees' purchases, the date and exact time. He puts in my employee number, which was written down on a post-it note, next to him, and pulls up my purchase history in front of me. He says, "I have learned you have quite the sweet tooth." Then he says, "Let's look at your last purchase, made at midnight, just the other day." He says, "Oh, look at this. Tampons and pads, and you are still hardly using the bathroom." I was major creeps out and said I had to get back to work, and I just left and hurried back to my station. It left a really bad feeling in my stomach, and I stopped using my phone on break or buying anything from the store. He didn't come around for his lunch break for a while, until a few weeks later when he decides that he wants to come back behind the restaurant and help us kids out, because he said he worked in some fancy restaurant way back when, and he wants to teach us a thing or two. I found it really annoying for him to be in my way and feeling he needed to teach me how to do everything. He always has to be working right next to me and correcting everything I did, but our manager didn't care, so I couldn't do anything about it. He was always asking me really personal questions about my life, trying to know more about my past, how he couldn't find me on social media, and even went as far as to ask me once if I was having sex with my boyfriend. He would even walk over to the restaurant after my lunch break to remind me to remember to pay for my pizza slice before I go home, only to walk back to his office. He has even called to remind me on the store phone. I finally had enough when one day my boyfriend got let off work early, and he decided to stop by my work and grab a large pizza for us to have for dinner, and give me a ride since I was getting off of work soon as well. Well, Chad so happened to be helping in the restaurant that day and saw me wave hi to my boyfriend and tell him I'm getting off work in about 20 minutes while a coworker rang him up. I went to the back and started finishing up some dishes when Chad comes back there and confronts me. He says, "So that's your boyfriend, huh?" I'm like, "Yep," and try to ignore him. He says, "Well, I don't really like him coming into my store. I don't like the way he looks, and I don't trust him, so you can't bring him around anymore." He started asking for my boyfriend's first and last name and date of birth and all that. I just said, "I don't think you have that kind of power." He walked away. I went home, and while my boyfriend and I were eating dinner, I get a call from the store manager saying Chad did an investigation on the people I bring into the restaurant as guests, and that one of them has piercings and tattoos and long hair, my boyfriend, and even a DUI. His father did, but not my boyfriend. And the store manager told me until my boyfriend gets a haircut and dresses more nicely, he can't come into the store anymore. I was shocked. So shocked. I just said, "Okay." I hung up and thought about it more. This was a big box stores. Hundreds and hundreds of customers in and out every day. And they banned my boyfriend because he looks too punk. I walked into the store manager's office the next day and quit. And I flipped off one of the security cameras on my way out because I knew Chad was watching me. I couldn't take another second of that creep. Most definitely one of the strangest experiences I have ever had anywhere, at a job or with anyone, really.
I could almost see a storm brewing up when I saw my mom walk in the house with yet another outrageously expensive necklace. My dad would go all haywire if he found out that she went out on yet another spree to drain all of his precious money, I thought. She has become a serious shopping addict and thinks that she can hide it easily because of my disability to hear. Well, much to her dismay, I absolutely can. When I was about 7, I developed a rare ear disease, due to which I couldn't hear anything by the time I reached the age of 10. We tried numerous treatments. Consequently, I underwent through several surgeries, but nothing really seemed to work for me. I was distressed. I knew life wouldn't be easy anymore, and I was petrified of the huge expedition in front of me, which was learning sign language and reading lips. I felt like my life has been turned upside down when I found out I couldn't go to the school every normal kid does. Yes, you guessed it right. I had to get enrolled into the school for children with sight and hearing disabilities. I'd be lying if I said it didn't take a toll on me. One day, I was so tired of limitation imposed by my disability that I started crying heavily. I fell to my knees with my head held between my hands, drowning in the river of my tears. My broken dreams and newfound anxieties would haunt me in my sleep. I was not ready to admit that I couldn't listen and jam to my favorite Fleetwood Mac songs. But I still had some luck left. God gave me good friends. It was just another regular stressful day until I saw my friend Macy rushing towards me with a bright grin on her face. She engulfed me in a hug. I was slightly taken by her strange behavior. "What's up with you today?" I asked. She nudged my elbow and pulled me to a side, whispering into my ear, "I have something for you." She had sparked my curiosity. "What's this device in your hand?" I asked. "This?" she laughed. "It will change your life." "Congrats! You can finally hear, my love." I would never believe her if I didn't try it for myself. Yes, I could hear everything. I could finally listen to Joni Mitchell as much as I wanted. I felt my feet lift off the ground. I was enthralled. I decided to be coy about it and didn't tell my parents a word about it. I couldn't believe that my parents didn't buy me a hearing aid despite seeing me struggle intensely. I felt betrayed, that too by my own parents. It felt unreal. They couldn't understand my misery. I talked about a storm earlier. So one night, my parents got dressed up for a party. My mom put on her twinkling necklace and clingy black dress. Both of them looked dapper. It seemed like they were going to a fancy party at an elite's palace. I was bewildered. When did they become so rich? I asked myself. At this point, I couldn't care less. I grabbed some snack and went to watch TV. Netflix and chill, you call it. All of a sudden, I heard someone banging on the door heavily. I slightly panicked, but decided to hear the door anyway. I ran to see in the CCTV my parents had recently installed. I saw a middle-aged woman in distress. "Yes?" I asked. "Open the door, please! They're after me! It's Tracy! I'm in trouble!" She looked like she genuinely needed help, so I opened the door and let her in. Her eyes were sunken in. She had huge bags underneath. It appeared as if she hasn't slept for days, her lips chapped and dehydrated. She kept asking me questions about some necklaces and my parents' whereabouts. I somehow told her I couldn't hear and left the room to bring her some food and water. She ate and continued thanking me profusely. Few minutes later, she retired to my bed as suggested by me, and within few seconds she dozed off to sleep. The sound of my parents quarreling snapped me out of my daze. I rushed towards them. "Why aren't you asleep, Emily?" my mom asked me. I sighed and asked them to follow me to my room. That is when I saw the color draining from their faces. They shrieked, "Why did you come here, Trace?" My mom's voice echoed through my room. We are in turmoil, I thought to myself. My dad made up some lie about Tracy's relationship with my parents and instructed me to go sleep in their room. I know eavesdropping is a bad thing, but I was not bothered. I still tried listening to my parents talk. I realized my friend Macy wasn't lying when she said, "This device is extremely high-powered because I could hear some men talking. We can't keep waiting for her here forever. They may call cops on us. We should leave." The huge black Mercedes drove off swiftly. Soon after, I heard my parents sneaking out of the house. I ran up to the huge window and couldn't believe what I had seen. My parents were sure hiding the truth from me. They met a guy in front of Tracy's car. He handed them red boxes. "We'll put them in the lock room." I was dumbfounded. Did we have a lock room in our home, or are they talking about our study? I had to find out, so I tried to hide somewhere they couldn't see me. My dad went to his study, followed by my mom. My dad removed his hand-knotted vintage rug, and I wish I prepared myself for this moment, because beneath the rug was a door to a basement. It would be an understatement if I say I was stunned. The room was stacked with cash and red-colored velvet boxes. My eyes shone as my mom opened few boxes. The diamonds and jewels lit up the whole room. I gasped and rubbed my eyes in disbelief. I heard my mom say, "Let's wrap up this matter tomorrow. We'll have to do something about Tracy. She can cause us some heavy trouble." I was confused. What are they hiding from me? How do I find out? I was exhausted. I was hyper-aware of my surroundings, so upon feeling slightest disturbance near my dad's study, I was up on my feet and marched toward the room. As I opened the door, she gasped, her mouth ajar. She panicked and tried to make excuses, and suddenly I felt a shift in her expression. Her lips upturned in a soft smile, and with that she came closer to me. "You've been so kind to me," she said, while stroking my hair. In a matter of seconds, she pushed me into the basement and closed the door. She knew the passcode for this safe room? I shrieked. I couldn't believe how naive I was. Now it was me in that room, all alone, crying and knocking on the door hastily, but no one heard my cries. Few seconds later, "Tracy is gone. She ran away," I heard my dad say through my hearing aid. My mom wailed while I could imagine my dad had his head in hands. He was furious at my mom. "You said Tracy was your good friend? Would you like to rethink about it?" my dad said, gritting his teeth. "What are you going to tell our boss, Alex? He will not be good to us. You are one to blame," said my dad. "Do you want more of those blindingly shiny neck pieces?" My dad continued attacking my mom with snide remarks. I could only hope my parents would realize I was missing, but they didn't. So I sat on the floor of the room, soaking up the warmth from dim light of the room. I was surrounded by heaps of cash and boxes filled with jewelry. I didn't know my hearing device could catch the lowest and highest of the frequencies. I heard buzzing sounds. I figured out it was the boss Alex my parents were worried about, the same guy I saw in the black Mercedes. I thought my parents would finally come and look for me. The bell ringing snapped me out of my haze. I figured they were inside my house. They were demanding about Tracy and her stuff. Her stuff? I questioned myself. I could hear their footsteps approaching toward the study. Saying my prayers under my breath, I was ready for the relief. My parents opened the door of the room. There were two guys dressed in black standing in front of me. Their eyes lit us at the sight of cash and load of jewelry. Right when they were bussing looking inside, my parents shoved them inside and locked the room. I quickly hid behind the bags, hoping they won't notice my presence. But they did, and a shriek left their mouth that shrilled throughout the room. They were terrified. For a few seconds, I couldn't understand it, but eventually got a hang of it and decided to play along to what they were thinking. Suddenly, one of them broke their silence. His lips were quivering, eyes were wide, and body shivering. "Soul of the goodness, we ask for your forgiveness. What can we do for you to forgive us?" I had to stifle my giggles and continue with the act I had put on. I said, "Leave these people alone. It's not their fault. Go earn the money the righteous way. You need to leave, leave, leave," in a sing-song voice. I was surprised at myself and was trying my best to suppress my laughter. Both of them nodded their heads hurriedly. I think God answered my prayers, and my parents opened the door of the room. Both of them hurried out and ran without even looking back. They were definitely running for their lives. My parents chased them without even noticing me. As soon as they left, I came out of the safe room and ran to my room. I locked myself into my room. I sat on my bed, recollecting myself. I was thinking about my whole day as I lied on the bed. "Whoa, what a whirlwind was this day," I said to myself. I walked up to my desk, took out my journal. I started writing about the unusual events of the day. It is sure something to remember for the rest of my life. Why would my parents lie to me? And why were they doing this? I pondered over the situation. I finally understood that they were doing illegal business just to feed their hunger for money. I felt ashamed. How can they be so selfish? They were buying those second-copy jewelry and selling it to the men I encountered earlier, who sold them ahead in black. I was in a state of shock. I thought we were poor, and my parents made money through blood and sweat. Since my dad had a small job in the corporate and my mom was a housewife who stayed at home and played dress-up every single day of her life. I heard the door closing, which signaled me that they were finally inside. I came out of my room, pretending to rub sleep off my eyes. That was the moment my mom turned toward me and gave me a sympathetic smile. I feigned unawareness about the situation and asked my parents if they could buy me a hearing aid, to which they blatantly refused. I couldn't believe my eyes. My heart said to confront them about the heaps of money they've been hiding underneath the ground, but my mind said to remain silent, and perhaps this was the reason why they want me to stay deaf. Nevertheless, I had learned my lessons.
My biggest secret I have to tell you. Hi. All you need to know about me is that I'm currently almost 14 and a female. One day I was with my older sister at a festival, and we went to a psychic palm reader. And my sister went first, and according to hers, it went very well, and she had a great reading. Now, when I went in, the lady touched my hands and jolted back. I was scared, but she seemed terrified of what she had just noticed. She started chanting out the number 14 over and over, and then she started trying to get some words out of it. I was scared and trying to help her. She said, and I quote, "Dark, something dark, window 14, him 14, no, dark, ZMSJ, beach, name." I was shaking her to make her come out of it, and when she did, she sprung straight into action, writing down her phone number and address of her shop, and told me to come there before my 14th birthday, so she could help. For a while, I just thought she was insane, and it was a scam. Then I decided to call her, and the phone line said that it was disconnected. So I looked up her shop, and it is not a thing. It's like she completely disappeared off the face of the earth. That's when I looked back at what she said, and I remembered she said window, and immediately I thought of one thing. When I was about 11 years old, I had a thing happen to my window when I was in my room that I remember my dad telling me to shut my window and lock it because it started to get cold outside, and I did as he said. But later that night, I woke up to being really cold. I looked over in my window, and it has been unlocked and lifted just slightly, but nothing else happened that night. I shut the window, locked it, and I woke up in the morning. It was still locked. And then, my 12th birthday, the same thing happened, but the window was just a little bit more open. That happened twice that night, before I woke up in the next morning. But then, my 13th birthday happened. I had remembered that my window opens on my birthday sometimes, which I thought was just some weird coincidence. So that night, I had a couple of friends over, and we and my parents all watched a movie outside the living room. But in the middle of watching a movie, we heard a loud crack come from my room. Immediately, my dad ran into there to see what happened, and he just walked in and said, "What the heck?" I followed him in there. When I looked at the window, I was a little scared to see that there had been a large crack in the middle of the top part of my window. And the window was completely open, and the screen was popped out, and it had fallen onto the ground outside. We checked everywhere that night, inside the house and outside. There was no sign of forced entry. No one had been there. The window just cracked open, and the screen had popped out. And now, to hear that the palm reader said something about my being aware of being 14, I was so scared. I mean, how could she have known that? The scary part was the fact that she was scared of me. But just this experience isn't why I decided to write this. It was because I went to the fair a few days ago, and I went to a tarot card reader with my older sister again, and she heard everything my tarot card reader said. That I would be going somewhere soon. I didn't know, but it wasn't really my decision, and that something very dark would happen to me. And she said that it would happen very soon. My birthday is also very soon. I was immediately scared of what that could have meant, but she also said that I would meet someone, a boy. He would make my life better. He would take me somewhere that I would feel free. But she did say that I would never fall in love with him until I really saw who he was. She said that he would be a cocky and full of himself and mean and just overall not a good person. But then I would see the real him and fall in love even though no one would even know about it. which didn't make any sense to me. The night after I got back, in this dream I was running through the woods, and I was happy. I was running through the woods completely happy, and someone was there running with me. Even though I couldn't see them, I didn't see who it was. And after I had run for a while, I saw a beach that I recognized. I don't know where from, and I ran to the beach, and sat next to me was a rock, and engraved on that rock was the name Zeta, which for some reason I knew was the first name in the initials of ZMSJ, which were the initials of the thing the palm reader had said. Then that's when I woke up. I had a dream the next night where I could tell that I was younger. And I was in a small beach house on a small deserted island, not much bigger than the house itself. And I walked up to a mirror and looked at myself. I looked just like me, but with no memory of even being me. I'll admit, I looked a little more muscular and a little more roughed up. But then I got angry at something for some reason. And when I looked back at myself, my soft green eyes turned ice blue for just a second, and then I woke up. But after that dream, I'm scared to sleep tonight, and also my birthday is coming up in less than a month, and I don't know what to expect. So there you go. My story, if literally anyone has read this far. I just needed to put it out there, somewhere, because I'm scared. Spirit, universal signs, or final destination. It's 9/11/2018 at 10:30 a.m., and I'm having the most weird day of my life. But this weirdness isn't just affecting me. My boyfriend is also having an off, weird, and unsettling day as well. We woke up between 5:30 to 6 a.m., not on purpose. But this isn't an odd occurrence for us to wake up early. I have a kidney disease, so when the pain is high, I cannot sleep. He usually stays up with me until I feel better. Nothing weird started happening until around 7 or 8 a.m. He goes off in a trance, and I knew he had seen something that had freaked him out. I asked him what he had seen, and he replied, "Thought I seen a white light go from the kitchen door to the bathroom door, but my eyes are probably playing tricks on me." I had replied to that with a simple, "You're tired. Go get some sleep." But once he's awake for good. Some time goes by and I see a white, round, and bright light that resembles an orb fly from the kitchen to the bathroom. I got freaked out and expressed to him what I had seen. We sat for a little bit being spooked. We decided to play with an Ouija board. Wonderful idea, I know. Nothing happened. It didn't work. Or did it? We started hearing knocks and threes in our kitchen. Went to investigate. Nothing. Appeared normal. It happened 3 times. Hasn't happened since. This was 8:38 a.m. After this happened, my boyfriend randomly says, "Oh, today is 9/11, and we go on discussing that topic a little bit. Then we decided to Google signs of ghosts in house. Another wonderful idea. And the signs seemed true. For us, at the moment. Knocks, orbs, etc. Then I stumbled across pages like, "Signs a spirit is trying to communicate with you. When will you die? And how will you die? Quiz." I clicked every page, and, well, here's my discoveries. Spirit communication. Sending certain numbers or words. Radio stations. Light bulbs going out frequently, which doesn't happen all the time at our house. Death date. Took the quiz. Got a long time before I die. Year 2069. The boyfriend got 2092. No, we do not believe in this. Did it merely for shits and giggles. How will I die? I got car accident and he got in his sleep from old age. Again, do not believe in this, but it does have significance to my story. Nothing else happens weird. I'm still feeling sick and pain, but it's time for him to work. I drive him to work because he can't drive at the moment. This is where our day gets weirder. Like, guys, I'm talking the feeling of final destination. We keep hitting all red lights. Nothing unusual, though. Except he goes to turn on the radio. Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. Funny coincidence? We laughed it off and continued our car ride. I take the exit to the interstate and he flips radio stations. Interstate driving. Okay, not funny anymore. We started getting spooked. Talk about the spirit communicating through radio stations. We get on the interstate and this van pulls out in front of me with a huge red or white sign that read September 11th, 2001. Remember how I was discussing 9/11, today's date? Strange, I tell him. I'm having anxiety. I slow down, drive with more caution than usual. He flips radio stations. I'm feeling anxious. And we both get even more spooked. Turn off the radio. Drove past this loud sound, construction zone, and it freaked me out. Felt more louder than usual. And I literally felt like I was in Final Destination. Rolled up my windows and we discussed being spooked. Reached his work. Nothing else happened. He's there currently. I don't work until 6:45 p.m., so I'm currently home while writing this. I feel I'm being watched. I have heard the creaking of the floor where you have to stand to make it creak, and I have the feeling of something bad is going to happen. I'll keep updated in comments, but I wanted this day documented. I also want to know if anyone has this type of stuff going on to them, especially the radio stations. I'm a big believer in universal signs, but now I'm debating whether a spirit is trying to contact me. What do you think? Creepy grocery guy. Little backstory, I was 16 when this happened, and I was in excellent physical shape. I'm now 17. The diner I worked at was on the side of a road and was next to a gas station that we shared car parks with. The diner had an odd setup to get to the back bins and the storeroom. You had to go through a big metal door, and that was at the back of the kitchen. The diner I worked at also had a fresh produce supplier that delivered most days early in the morning, and they had a new delivery boy. I'll call him Billy. He had been with them for around 2 months. He was a hot topic between the female employees, as he was extremely good looking, but seemed to be a loner. I don't know for sure, but I think he was around 18 or 19. I'd spoken to him before, and he had asked me for my number once, but I politely said I don't give it out. I was 3 months into my first paying job at a local diner working as a waitress when this happened, and on this particular day, I was asked to stay on and work the night shift with a female colleague that I was familiar with. I didn't mind, as I saw it as an opportunity for extra cash. It was around 12:30 a.m. when the last family eating left. So it was up to me, the other female waitress aged 18, and the male chef, who I believe was around the age of 24, to clean and lock the place up, as the owners were on vacation. I decided to take the trash to the bins out back, as I was too tired to do anything else like sweep up or clean the tables. To this day, I regret being lazy. To get back to the bins, you have to go through the kitchen, and then through a big heavy metal door, which I was okay about doing as I've done it many times before. But once I got out, I forgot that the hinge where the door clips to the wall was broken, and it slipped and closed naturally. I was angry as I'd have to walk around the whole diner to get back in through the front door. As I stretched up to throw the bag in the bin, I heard a noise, It sounded like a grunt, and it kind of spooked me. But I put it down to my imagination. But then I heard it again, and it was coming from the storeroom. Me, being my stupid Dora the Explorer-ass self, poked my head into the storeroom, and at the beginning I saw nothing. But out of the corner of my eye, I caught something moving very slowly toward me, and as my eyes adjusted, it was Billy, the grocery boy. And he was holding his trainers in one hand. Once he saw I noticed him, he froze. I was trying to think through every logical explanation for why he would be in the storeroom at this time. But I got interrupted by Billy stuttering, I'm just putting your delivery in here. My van broke down. That's why I'm so late. This frightened me to the core, as my boss told me she had not made any orders, as we needed to use up old stock first. And then it clicked. He had no shoes on. He was trying to sneak up on me. We just stared at each other, and I muttered, "Oh, that's okay. I'm going inside now. Shut the door when you're done." As I felt if I questioned why he was there, he would get hostile, and the situation for me would become even worse. I proceeded to back away, still facing him, until I was near the gate that opened into the car park. "The kitchen door's shut, silly." He laughed slightly. I've never felt so patronized in my life. He was talking to me as if I was a child that he was correcting. "Oh yeah, ha ha ha, looks like I'll have to go the long way." I joked about it as I could feel my situation getting worse. He just had an expression that reminded me of that cat from Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, just shut the door when you're done. Bye." I shout out before turning around and opening the gate. My whole body froze when I felt a vice grip on my wrist. Now that I think of it, I'm surprised he didn't break it. By instinct, I started tugging my arm away and shouted at him something like, "Dude, what the fuck? Get off me." But that only seemed to make it worse, and it was almost like he loved to see me struggle. "Stop resisting me," he said in a flat tone as he used his other hand to try and pull my skirt down. I think all my fear turned into fight as I began kicking and punching the right side of his face. I'm about 5'8", and he is probably around 6'2". I think I poked him in the eye with one of the fake nails I had on, and he instantly let go and started cussing very loud. I took my chance and bolted out of the gate and into the car park, which was empty, a part of one car parked in the gas station at a pump. I looked closer. Inside was occupied before I ran toward it. I looked back at the gate and saw Billy running straight at me, calling and shouting things like, "I knew you were a bad girl," and "Get back here, you stupid slut." The loud shouting seemed to get attention of the car. And to my surprise, it was the family that had left 10 minutes before. Once I reached the car, they were all standing outside and looked confused until they saw Billy running towards us. The father and the son stood in front of me and told him to calm down or they'll call the cops. This just seemed to make Billy worse. He started hissing at them and jumped at me before he could grab me. The father grabbed him and pushed him so hard and he fell to the ground. We all just stared at him while he got up off the floor and dusted himself off. "You really should have given me your number." He just nodded his head at me like he was scolding a child. All the fear I was keeping in just came out and I began sobbing hysterically into the mother's chest. The older brother started to cuss Billy out and push him away from all of us. "I like the way you fight me." He smirked at me and turned around and started walking towards the road, the brother following him to make sure he left. When the cops arrived, we went into the diner and I gave a full statement, and so did the family. It turns out the other waitress and the chef were cleaning with the radio on with full volume, so they couldn't hear me screaming. When my boss came back, she was told everything by the police, and we now have a new supplier. The kitchen door hinge is now fixed, and I no longer take the trash out at night. As we knew all of Billy's employers, the police paid them a visit, only to be told he quit 2 weeks prior, and the address he had given them was a block of abandoned apartments, and his number was disconnected, so nothing ever came of the police report. I am now dating the oldest brother of the Diner family. I am so thankful that they couldn't work their sat-nav, because I know I couldn't have outrun Billy to the entrance of the diner.